The smell hit her first. Wet cardboard, frying plantains sweet as burnt sugar, and the copper tang of the open sewer that ran like a black vein down the center of La Catalina. It was the smell of Medellin's underbelly, the barrio where the city threw its forgotten things, broken furniture, broken men, and girls like her. Griselda Restrepo was 11 years old, but her eyes held the flat, ancient weight of river stones. She sat on a crate behind the bodega of Don Alicio, her knees drawn to her chest, a stolen mango cooling in the pocket of her shorts. The pulp was sticky against her thigh. She didn't eat it. She waited. The man in the trunk of the blue Chevrolet had stopped screaming 20 minutes ago. Now there was only the wet, rhythmic thump-thump of a fist against metal, slowing, fading into a ragged breath that rattled like dry leaves in a gale. Griselda didn't flinch. She had learned that flinching was a luxury for people who had something left to lose. She had lost her father to the ghost of a ship in Cartagena before she could walk. She had lost her mother to a bottle of aguardiente and a stranger's bed in Medellin. She owned nothing but the calluses on her palms and a secret she kept folded tight behind her ribs. She was not afraid of the dark. The trunk lid flew open. Light, harsh and sudden, stabbed into the metal cavity. The man inside, a tourist, maybe, or a businessman who'd taken a wrong turn down a one-way street, blinked up at the face of El Niño, Don Alicio's eldest lieutenant. El Niño was 19, thick-necked, smelling of cheap cologne and old sweat. He held a .38 revolver loosely in his right hand, the barrel still smoking from the warning shot he'd fired into the tire of a passing bus. "Get him out," El Niño said. His voice was bored. "The boss wants the fingers first. Then we send the ear to the family with the note." Two younger boys, barely Griselda's age, scrambled forward. They grabbed the man by his ankles. He was heavy, dead weight, his suit ruined by urine and the dirt of the trunk floor. He didn't fight. He just wept, a high, keening sound that grated against Griselda's nerves like a dull knife on bone. Pathetic, she thought. You're already dead. Why make noise about it? She slipped off the crate. The mango rolled out, hitting the dirt. She didn't bend to retrieve it. She moved through the shadows of the alley, silent as a lizard on a hot wall, circling behind the Chevrolet. "Hey." "Niña," El Niño barked without turning. "Watch the street. If the Pacos come, you whistle." "You hear me?" Griselda stopped. She looked at the back of El Niño's head, at the greasy curl of hair at his nape. She could put the rock in her pocket, sharp, flat, quartz shot through with iron, through his eye socket before he turned around. She knew the anatomy of it. She had watched the butcher at the market split a pig's skull. It wasn't magic. It was physics. "Whistle," she said. Her voice was a rasp, unused to conversation. "I whistle." She didn't move to the street. She moved deeper into the alley, toward the rusted gate of the compound where the kidnapped man had been held. The air grew cooler there, smelling of damp concrete and the sickly sweet rot of hydrangeas blooming wild over the wall. She wasn't running. She was hunting. She found him in the shadows of the bougainvillea, smoking a cigarette that glowed like a firefly's ass. Papo Mejia. He was 12. A year older. A lifetime older. He wore a white shirt stained gray at the collar, sleeves rolled to the elbows revealing forearms roped with muscle from hauling cement bags at the construction site on Carrera 70. His hair was a black tangle, his skin the color of polished copper. There was a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a bottle fight at La Feria 6 months prior. He didn't jump when she materialized beside him. He just exhaled a plume of smoke, turning his head slowly, his eyes, dark, liquid, startlingly gentle, settling on her face. "La Viuda," he murmured, using the name the older boys hissed when they thought she couldn't hear. "The widow." Because she killed things before they could die on their own. You're supposed to be on lookout. El Niño is busy, Griselda said. She stood close enough to smell the tobacco and the soap. Jabon de Cuaba, harsh lye soap on his skin. The man in the trunk. He's done making noise. Papo flicked the cigarette. It hissed in a puddle. Then it's time for the fingers. You want to watch? No, me neither. He leaned back against the stucco wall, crossing his ankles. The pose was deliberate, a performance of boredom that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were sharp, scanning the roofline, the alley mouth, the darkness behind her. He was the only one who watched the shadows the way she did. They're sloppy, Griselda. El Niño cuts the fingers off while the heart's still beating. Messy. The blood ruins the leather seats. Don Alicio hates cleaning blood from leather. Griselda tilted her head. You know a better way. I know a way where the man doesn't scream, Papo said quietly. You cut the brachial artery first. Inside the arm. Quick. Lights out in 30 seconds. Then you take your time with the knife. Clean. Professional. Professional, she repeated, tasting the word. It tasted like gold. You talk like you own the knife. I don't own the knife, he said. But I know how to hold it. So do you. He turned his head fully then, pinning her with that gaze. It wasn't the look the other men gave her, calculating, hungry, or dismissive. It was a mirror. He saw the hardness in her, the granite core, and he didn't look away. He didn't flinch. Show me, she challenged. Papo smiled. It transformed his face, sharpening the cheekbones, softening the scar. It was a dangerous thing, that smile. It made her chest cavity feel too small for her ribs. Tomorrow, he said. Midnight. The railroad bridge over the Medellin River. Bring the rock you keep in your pocket. The quartz one. I'll bring the knives. You have knives. I steal them from the butcher. 2 boning knives. Flexible. Sharp enough to split a hair. He pushed off the wall, closing the distance between them until he stood inches away. The air crackled, charged with something that wasn't fear, wasn't lust, not yet, not at 12, but a terrifying magnetic recognition. Same species, the silence said. Same predator. Don't tell El Niño, he whispered, his breath warm on her forehead. Don't tell your mother. This is ours. Nustro. He reached out, his rough fingertips brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The contact was electric, a jolt that bypassed the brain and rewired the heart. Griselda Restrepo, who had stared down the barrel of a gun at 9 and hadn't blinked, felt her breath hitch. Nustro, she echoed, the word foreign and sweet in her mouth. Ours, tomorrow, he promised. We practice on a dead dog. Or a cat. Whatever we find. Then we figure out how to get out of here. New York, she said instantly. The dream was a shared currency. The buildings touch the sky. The snow is white, not gray. Nobody knows our names. New York, Papo agreed. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. I'll be the one driving the car. You sit in the back. Like a queen. I don't want to sit in the back, she said, her voice hardening, the queen emerging from the girl. I want to drive. Papo's smile widened, genuine and approving. Claro que sí. You drive. I'll navigate. Partners, partners, she swore. He kissed her then. Not on the mouth, too soon, too much, but on the corner of her jaw, a dry press of lips that branded the skin. A claim. A contract signed in saliva and dust. Midnight, he whispered against her bone. Don't be late, Jeffa. He melted back into the shadows, moving with the silent grace of a jungle cat, leaving her alone with the pounding of her heart and the taste of him on her skin. Griselda pressed her fingers to the spot. The quartz rock in her pocket burned against her thigh, heavy and cold. Midnight, she thought. Tomorrow we begin. The railroad bridge spanned the Rio Medellin like a steel skeleton thrown across a wound. The river below was a torrent of gray foam and plastic waste, rushing toward the valley floor. The air smelled of ozone and wet stone. Griselda arrived first. She sat on the rusted girder, legs dangling over the abyss, the quartz rock warm in her clenched fist. She had stolen the boning knives from the butcher's block herself that afternoon, tucking them into the waistband of her shorts, the cool steel a comfort against her spine. She waited. The city lights glittered below, a constellation of despair and ambition. Somewhere, a siren wailed. Somewhere, a baby cried. The noise of Medellin was a living thing, a beast breathing in the dark. Footsteps on the gravel approach. Slow. Deliberate. She didn't turn. "You're late. 3 minutes," Papo's voice drifted from the darkness. "I had to climb the water tower to get the view. Wanted to see the city from above before we start cutting it up." He dropped down beside her, the metal groaning under his weight. He smelled of rain and electricity. In his hand, he held 2 knives. They caught the moonlight, pale and lethal. "2," he said, handing her one. The handle was wrapped in black tape. Flexible steel. Cachilla's de Desusar. You hold it like a pencil. Index finger on the spine. Thumb on the flat. The blade does the work. You don't force it. You guide it. Griselda took it. The weight was perfect. An extension of her will. She turned it in her hand, the blade catching the light. And the artery, brachial. In her arm, midway between elbow and shoulder. You feel for the pulse. Some thump. You slide the blade in beside the nerve, not through it. 2 inches. Twist. Pull. The spray goes away from your face. He mimicked the motion, fluid and hypnotic. Clean. Silent. Respectful. Respectful, she scoffed. For a kidnapping victim. For the meat, Papo corrected gently. We are butchers, Griselda. The sooner you accept it, the better the cut. The better the life. He reached over, adjusting her grip, his fingers warm and strong over her cold ones. The intimacy of the instruction was a physical thing, a rope tying them together in the dark. Your stance is wrong. Feet shoulder width. Weight on the balls. You're leaning back. You lean in. You own the space. He positioned her, his hands on her hips, her shoulders, guiding her like a sculptor shaping clay. There. Now you're not a girl. You're the knife. The lesson lasted an hour. They practiced on a stray dog Papo had lured with a chunk of chorizo. Quick, merciful. A single slit to the throat that spilled hot blood over Griselda's hands. She didn't vomit. She didn't cry. She watched the light leave the animal's eyes with a clinical fascination, noting the mechanics of the death rattle, the relaxation of the sphincters. Good, Papo said, wiping his blade on the grass. Very good. You have the stomach. Most men don't have the stomach. I'm not a man, she said, wiping her hands on her shorts, the denim drinking the dark fluid. I'm Griselda. Me Griselda, he corrected. The possessive pronoun hung in the cold air, a flag planted on a conquered peak. They sat together on the girder afterward, sharing a bottle of aguardiente Papo had pilfered. The anise burn cleaned the taste of iron from their throats. They talked in low voices, mapping a future that didn't exist yet. We take the product to the coast, Papo planned, tracing routes on the back of his hand with a dirty fingernail. Cartagena. Santa Marta. Boats to Panama. From Panama, the planes to Miami. New York. We don't work for Don Alicio. We don't work for anyone. We are the route. Carlos Trujillo has the roots, Griselda pointed out. He's old. He's heavy. But he has the planes. Carlos Trujillo is a dinosaur, Papo dismissed. He thinks respect is given. He doesn't know respect is taken. We'll be faster. Smarter. We'll hide it in the lingerie. In the foam padding of the bras. In the lining of the coats. Women's clothes. Who searches a woman's underwear at customs? Nady, Griselda stared at him. The brilliance of it struck her like a physical blow. The invisibility of women. The ultimate camouflage. Lingerie, she breathed. Lenceria. You're a genius, Papo Mejia. I'm yours, he said simply. That's the only genius I need. He leaned in, and this time the kiss found her mouth. It tasted of anise and blood and the future. It was clumsy and desperate and perfect. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, as if he could fuse their ribcage, share a single heartbeat. Mine, the kiss said. Forever. They stayed until the first gray fingers of dawn clawed over the eastern hills, painting the river silver. They walked back through the waking barrio, shoulders touching, a single silhouette against the light. Griselda felt invincible. She had a knife. She had a partner. She had a plan. She had love. She didn't know that love was the flaw in the armor. She didn't know that the target painted on her back was shaped exactly like Papo Mejia. The hit came 3 weeks later. A Tuesday. The sky the color of a bruised plum. Griselda was in the bodega, counting stacks of damp pesos for Don Alicio, her fingers flying over the bundles with the speed of a counting machine. She heard the commotion before she saw it. A shout, the scrape of chairs, the heavy, wet sound of a body hitting the packed dirt floor. She didn't look up. She finished the stack. 1,000. 2,000. 3,000. Niña. El Niño's voice, stripped of its usual boredom, cracked like a whip. Get out here. Now, Griselda placed the last bill on the pile. She stood, smoothing her shorts. She walked out into the courtyard. The sun was brutal. In the center of the dirt yard, pinned beneath the boots of 2 of Don Alicio's sicarios, lay Papo. His white shirt was torn open. His face was a ruin of bruises, one eye swollen shut, his lips split and crusted. But his good eye, his beautiful eye, found hers instantly across the yard. It held no fear. It held only a fierce, burning apology. Run, the eye said. Don't watch. Run. Look at him, Don Alicio's voice rasped from the shadows of the veranda. The old man sat in a plastic lawn chair, an oxygen tank hissing beside him, a cigarillo trembling in his yellowed fingers. Look at what happens to thieves who steal the Don's gaze. Griselda's gaze didn't waver from Papo. What did he steal? He stole a look, El Niño sneered, kicking Papo in the ribs. A wet cough. He looked at La Mona. The Don's Niña. The girlfriend. He looked at her like she was his. Like he was a man. He's a gamin, a street rat. He doesn't get to look. La Mona, Griselda whispered. The girl with the dyed blonde hair and the dead eyes who sat on the Don's lap. She was 18. She was property. Papo had looked at property and forgotten his place. The sentence is death, Don Alicio wheezed. But first, the lesson. El Niño. The rock, El Niño grinned, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a chunk of quartz. Iron shot. Sharp-edged. My rock, Griselda thought, a cold clarity settling over her, freezing the blood in her veins. The rock I gave him. The rock he kept. Aridolate, El Niño ordered Papo. Kneel. Or we break your legs first. Popo spat blood onto the dirt. He didn't kneel. He struggled up onto one knee, then the other, defiance radiating from him like heat. He looked at Griselda again. Don't cry, his eyes commanded. Don't you dare cry. El Niño raised the rock. Any last words, Romeo? Papo's swollen lips moved. T. Quiro. Me Griselda. Run. The rock descended. It was a sickening, wet crunch. The sound of a melon splitting. Papo didn't scream. His body simply folded, collapsing sideways into the dust, one arm outstretched toward the veranda, toward the shadows where she stood. The courtyard erupted in laughter. Coarse, ugly laughter. The sicarios slapped each other's backs. El Niño tossed the bloody rock into the dirt, wiping his hands on his pants. Clean that up. Feed the dogs. Griselda didn't move. The laughter washed over her, a tide of noise she couldn't hear. Her vision tunneled until the world was only the still form in the dust, the dark blood pooling into the thirsty earth, turning the dirt into mud. Love makes you weak, a voice whispered in the ancient chamber of her mind. Love opens the door. Love hands them the rock. She looked at her hands. The hands that had held the knife on the bridge. The hands that had counted the money. The hands Papo had held, guiding her, promising her New York. They were empty. She looked at El Niño. He was laughing, turning back toward the bodega, already dismissing the scene, already forgetting the boy's name. He turned his back. Griselda moved. She didn't walk. She flowed. A shadow detaching from the veranda pillar. She crossed the courtyard in 3 silent strides. She didn't pick up the bloody rock. She picked up the machete leaning against the water tank, a tool for cutting plantain stalks, heavy, curved, razor-honed. El Niño took a step toward the door. Griselda brought the machete down in a perfect, practiced arc. Brachial artery. 2 inches. Twist. Pull. The spray went away from her face. She had leaned in. She had owned the space. El Niño didn't scream. He gurgled, a wet, surprised sound. He spun, eyes wide, clutching the ruin of his neck, arterial blood pulsing between his fingers like a red fountain. He stared at her, the girl, the widow, the counter of money, with an expression of pure, bewildered betrayal. He dropped to his knees. Then face down. The dust drank him too. The laughter died. The sicarios froze, hands drifting to waistbands. Griselda stood over the dying man, the machete dripping red onto her bare feet. The blood was hot. It burned. It was the only thing in the world that was real. She raised her head. She looked at Don Alicio. The old man wasn't laughing. The cigarillo had fallen from his fingers. His hand gripped the armrest of the plastic chair, knuckles white. The oxygen hissed. Power, Griselda thought, the word crystallizing into diamond in her chest. Power makes you safe. Power doesn't bleed. Power doesn't leave. She licked a speck of blood from her lip. It tasted like copper. It tasted like victory. It tasted like New York. Patron, she said. Her voice carried across the silent yard, steady and cold. The count is off by 3,000 pesos. I'll recount it. But first, clean this up. It's messy. You hate cleaning blood from the dirt. She turned her back on the Don. She turned her back on the body. She turned her back on the boy in the dust, on the ghost of the bridge, on the taste of anise and the promise of snow. She walked toward the bodega. Her spine was straight. Her step was light. She didn't limp. She didn't stumble. She didn't look back. Behind her, the flies were already gathering. But Griselda Restrepo was already gone. She was walking toward the railroad tracks, toward the river, toward the coast. She was 11 years old, and she had just learned the only lesson that mattered in the world she had chosen. Dead men don't leave. Dead men don't betray. Dead men belong to you forever. She tucked the quartz rock, clean now, washed by the morning dew on the grass she'd crossed, deep into her pocket. It was the only thing she took with her. Midnight, she whispered to the wind. We meet at midnight. In New York. The sun rose higher, burning the mist off the river. The girl who stole the devil's breath began to run. Chapter 2. The apprentice and the architect. The rain in Medellin did not fall. It hovered. A low, greasy suspension of moisture that clung to the skin and turned the dirt roads of La Catedral into ribbons of black mud. It smelled of wet cardboard, frying plantains, and the distinct metallic tang of the river that carried the city's secrets toward the sea. Griselda Restrepo stood on the balcony of the apartment on Cal 50, the brass key to the front door heavy and cold in her palm. She was 19, though her eyes held the calcified weight of 40. She wore a dress the color of dried blood, synthetic polyester that clung to hips widened by a difficult first birth. Dixon, sleeping in the back room, his tiny fist curled against his cheek. In the crib beside him, Huber, barely a year younger, snorted in his sleep, dreaming of nothing soft. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aguardiente and expensive tobacco, cohibas, smuggled in from Cuba before the embargo tightened its fist. Carlos Trujillo sat at the head of the dining table, which was not a table at all but a door laid across two sawhorses, covered in a velvet cloth. He was a man carved from mahogany and shadow, 35 years old, with hands that had never known calluses from labor, only the smooth grip of a steering wheel, the trigger of a .38, the edge of a ledger. He looked up as she entered, the smoke curling from his lips like a prayer. "You're dripping on the rug, mi vida." "There is no rug, Carlos." "Just the floor." He chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "Then buy one. Buy 10. Buy the factory that makes them. That is why I brought you here. Not to count the cracks in the plaster." Griselda moved to the table, her hips swaying with a deliberate, predatory grace. She didn't sit. She leaned, one hand flat on the velvet, the other lifting the heavy glass tumbler he had poured for her. The amber liquid caught the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. "Teach me," she said. Her voice was a husky whisper, stripped of the girlish lilt she used on the street corners. "Teach me the numbers. The roots. The weight of a kilo versus the weight of a man's word." Carlos's eyes, dark, flat, unreadable as obsidian, tracked the line of her throat as she swallowed the liquor. He reached out, his fingers rough against her wrist, stopping the glass before it hit the wood. "You want to learn the trade? Or you want to learn me? Is there a difference?" His thumb traced the blue vein at her wrist. "With me, there isn't. The trade is me. I am the architecture. You are just the brick. I am the foundation," she corrected, turning her hand over, trapping his fingers in a grip of surprising, crushing strength. "Without the foundation, the architect is just a man drawing pictures in the dust." He held her gaze. No fear. No arousal, not exactly. Something closer to recognition. A predator acknowledging a younger, leaner predator at the watering hole. "Sit," Carlos commanded softly. "Open the book. Page 1, Lavado de Dinero. Money laundering. The art of making dirty water run clear." For 6 months, the apartment on Cal 50 became a university of vice. By day, Carlos taught her the grammar of the global supply chain. He spread maps across the velvet. Colombia, Panama, the Caribbean, the hungry maw of Miami, the endless veins of New York. He showed her the language of the ledger: Costo, Fleet, Risco, Ganancia. He taught her that a kilo of base paste bought in the jungle for $50 became 3,000 in the labs, 25,000 in the hold of a plane, and 60,000 on the streets of Queens. The math was a religion, and the profit margin was the miracle. "You don't move product, Griselda," he told her one humid afternoon, guiding her hand as she calculated a conversion rate. "You move trust. The product is incidental. Cocaine, heroin, emeralds, bananas, it's all just weight. The only thing that matters is the certainty that the man on the other end of the radio will answer when you call. And if he doesn't answer, Then you send someone who makes him answer. Or you go yourself. She learned the chemistry of disappearance. Lie pits in the countryside. The specific gravity of a body, weighted with cement blocks, in the Rio Magdalena. The way to stage a carjacking, so the police wrote the report before the blood dried. Carlos was a meticulous surgeon of violence. He believed in the clean cut. Griselda, she discovered, preferred the jagged tear. It sent a clearer message. By night, the lessons changed texture. The bedroom was a sanctuary of sweat and whispers. Carlos worshipped her with a desperation that belied his power. He kissed the scar on her abdomen, appendectomy at 12, no anesthesia, a rusty knife, and the stretch marks mapping the geography of her sons. He treated her body not as a conquest, but as a relic he was sworn to protect. You are the only thing I own that cannot be seized, he murmured into her hair one night, the rain hammering the shutters. The police can take the warehouses. The rivals can burn the labs. The politicians can freeze the banks. But you are the vault. And I am the only one who knows the combination. Griselda lay silent, her fingers tracing the map of his old knife wounds, the topology of a life lived on the edge. She loved him in the only way she knew how, as a possession. A beautiful, dangerous tool she had sharpened herself. She memorized the rhythm of his breathing, the cadence of his snore, the specific pressure of his hand on her hip. Data. Intelligence. She was building a file on Carlos Trujillo, the most comprehensive dossier in existence, stored behind eyes that never truly closed. The turning point arrived not with a bang, but with a stitch of white lace. It was 1974. The market was saturating. The mules, desperate couriers swallowing condoms of paste, were unreliable, volatile, prone to bursting at 30,000 feet. The airlines were tightening security. The risk-to-reward ratio was tilting dangerously. Griselda sat at the sewing machine in the spare room, the whir of the needle a counterpoint to the cartoons playing on the tiny television for the boys. She held up a brassiere, a delicate construction of lace and underwire, imported from a catalog in Miami. She had sliced the lining, inserted a thin, heat-sealed plastic pouch, and stitched it shut with a thread that dissolved in water. Invisible. Washable. Deniable. Carlos stood in the doorway, a glass of whiskey in hand, watching her. The domestic scene, wife sewing, children playing, husband drinking, was a facade so perfect it induced nausea. "What is that?" he asked. "The future," she said, clipping the final thread. "Lingerie. Women's underwear. We ship crates of them to a front company in Queens. Moda Feminina, custom sees fabric. They feel lace. They see a legitimate textile import. Inside the lining. 50 kilos a shipment. Pure. No mules to flip. No balloons to burst. Just cloth." Carlos walked over, took the garment from her hand. He turned it over, feeling the weight, the subtle bulge. His face was unreadable in the dim light. "Genius," he said finally. "Absolute genius. You've solved the logistics bottleneck. You've removed the human variable." "I've removed your variable, Carlos," she said, her voice flat. "You don't need to negotiate with the pilots anymore. You don't need to trust the couriers. The product moves inside the commerce. The commerce is the product." He set the bra down on the sewing table. The silence stretched, thick as the rain outside. "It scales," he admitted. "It scales infinitely. New York, Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago. We become the Sears Roebuck of cocaine. We," she repeated. "Not you. We." He turned to face her, the amber liquid swirling. "Careful, mi vida. Ambition is a beautiful whore, but she carries diseases. You want to run the whole board. You want to be the queen. I want to survive," she said. "And survival requires expansion. Stagnation is death. You taught me that. I also taught you loyalty, he countered, his voice hardening. To the family. To the structure. This lingerie operation. It requires new contacts in New York. New distributors. New lawyers. New banks. It requires leaving Medellin. Leaving the protection of the old guard. It requires becoming someone else. I am becoming who I am, she said. You are the one who wants to stay the same. The word retirement was never spoken aloud, but it hung in the air between them like a ghost. Carlos spoke of a villa in Marbella. A school in Madrid for the boys. A legitimate life. Clean money, he called it. White money. Money that doesn't smell of blood and gasoline. Griselda listened, and she heard the death rattle of the empire. The confrontation came on a Tuesday. Ordinary. The boys were at a neighbor's. The apartment smelled of bandeja paisa, beans, rice, chorizo, plantain, avocado. A feast for a last supper. Carlos pushed his plate away, sated. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. I've made the arrangements. The passports are ready. Spanish citizenship through a lawyer in Bogotá. Clean papers. We leave Friday. The shipment to New York goes out Thursday. I've sold the route to the Ochoa brothers. A fair price. It buys us silence. It buys us safety. Griselda stopped chewing. A piece of plantain turned to paste on her tongue. You sold the route. I sold my route. My contacts. My infrastructure. I am the architect, remember. I dismantle what I build. You dismantle us. I save us, he corrected sharply. Griselda, look at me. Look at the boys. Dixon is 6. Uber is 5. Ozzy is 3. Do you want them counting kilos? Do you want them learning to dissolve bodies and lie? I didn't pull you out of the gutter to bury you in a gold coffin. I did it so you could be a mother. A wife. A señora. The word señora struck her like a physical blow. A cage made of lace and silk. And the lingerie operation, she asked, her voice devoid of inflection. The New York expansion. Dead, he said. Buried. Along with the risk. The Ochoas take the risk. We take the capital. We live. You're afraid, she whispered. It wasn't an accusation. It was a diagnosis. Carlos flinched, a micro-expression of rage. I am prudent. I have built something that lasts. You want to burn it down to see how high the flames go. That is not courage, Griselda. That is madness. Madness is the only logic that works in this world, she said. She stood up. The chair scraped back, a screech of wood on tile. You want to take my sons to Spain. To make them soft. To make them victims. I want to make them men, Carlos roared, slamming his fist on the table. The silverware jumped. Not soldiers. Not corpses. Men. And you will come with me. You are my wife. You will do as I say. The air pressure in the room dropped. The violence, always present, always managed, suddenly became unmanaged. Griselda looked at him. Really looked. She saw the gray at his temples. The tremor in his fingers, the early Parkinson's, or just the shakes of a man who had killed too many and slept too little. She saw the fatigue. The desire for the off-ramp. She felt a surge of something hot and sweet in her chest. Not love. Not hate. Ownership. He was trying to take the only thing that was hers. The empire. The future. The boys. If they live, they can leave. Dead, they are mine forever. The thought bloomed with the clarity of a mathematical proof. She walked to the sideboard where the bottle of aguardiente sat. Her back was to him. Sit down, Carlos. Eat your dessert. I made natilla. Your favorite. I'm not hungry, he grunted. Pack the bags. We leave in 3 days. I won't argue anymore. You don't have to argue, she said. She poured the clear liquid into 2 small glasses. She reached into the pocket of her house dress, her fingers closing around the tiny glass vial she had prepared weeks ago, the night she first stitched the bra. Cyanuro de potassio. Vast. Painless. A heart attack in a glass. The perfect exit for an architect who wanted to retire. She turned, holding out the glass. Drink with me. To the villa in Marbella. To the clean money. To the boys playing soccer in a park with no guns. Carlos stared at her. Suspicion flickered, then died, smothered by the sheer audacity of her submission. He wanted to believe. He needed to believe she would bend. To the boys, he said, taking the glass. And to you, mi vida. My apprentice. My architect. He threw his head back and drained it. Griselda touched the rim of her glass to her lips. She did not swallow. She watched him. The effect was theatrical, almost polite. Carlos set the glass down. He frowned, pressing a hand to his sternum. Indigestion, he muttered. Spicy chorizo. He stood to walk to the window, perhaps for air. His legs folded. He hit the tile hard, the sound wet and final. The aguardiente glass shattered beside his ear. Griselda did not rush. She did not scream. She walked over to him, her heels clicking a steady rhythm on the floor. He was gasping, eyes wide, pupils dilating, the terror of the drowning man who realizes the water is inside him. He reached for her, a silent plea. Help me. Save me. Love me. She knelt beside him, the silk of her dress pooling in the spreading puddle of spilled liquor. She cradled his head in her lap, stroking his hair, wiping the foam from his lips. She leaned down, pressing her mouth to his ear, whispering the only truth that mattered. "Shhh, me amor," she murmured, kissing his forehead, tasting the salt of his sweat, the copper of his fear. Sleep now. The architect rests. The foundation holds. She held him until the shuddering stopped. Until the hand clawing at her dress went limp. Until the eyes that had taught her to read a ledger glazed over, reflecting nothing but the bare bulb overhead. She stayed there for a long time. The natilla skin formed on the stove. The cartoons next door switched to the evening news. The rain stopped, leaving the world washed clean and smelling of wet earth. When the silence became absolute, Griselda gently laid his head on the floor. She stood, smoothing her dress. She went to the bathroom, washed her hands with surgical precision, scrubbing under the nails. She changed into a dark pantsuit, practical, severe. She packed 2 suitcases, hers and the boys'. She left his clothes hanging in the closet. He wouldn't need them in Marbella. She walked into the bedroom where Dixon and Huber slept, curled around each other like comma marks in a sentence she was rewriting. She woke them with soft kisses, dressing them in the dark, packing their favorite toys, plastic guns, a lead soldier. "Where is Pappy?" Dixon mumbled, sleep-heavy. "Pappy is staying here," she whispered, zipping the bag. "He's watching the house. We're going on an adventure." "To the snow." "New York?" Huber asked, eyes suddenly bright. "New York," she confirmed. "The biggest city in the world. And we are going to own it." She called a number from the hallway phone. A voice answered on the first ring. The architect has retired," Griselda said, her voice steady, devoid of grief, devoid of triumph. "Just fact. The apprentice is taking the tools. Send the car. We leave for the airport in 20 minutes. And call the lab. The lingerie order ships Thursday. Tell the Ochoas the deal is off. The route isn't for sale." She hung up. She looked at the bedroom door, behind which Carlos Trujillo lay cooling, the first husband, the maker, the master she had surpassed. She picked up the suitcases. She took the boys by the hand. "Come," Griselda Blanco said, opening the front door onto the steaming Medellin dawn. "Let's go build an empire." The brass key turned in the lock one last time. She didn't look back. Chapter 3, the mirror the snow in Queens didn't fall, it was pushed. It blew sideways off the East River, industrial grit mixed with ice, scouring the windshields of the Cadillacs idling outside the warehouse on 48th Avenue. Inside, the air was a different climate entirely. Thick, hot, smelling of acetone, Chanel No. 5, and the sweet metallic tang of uncut product. Griselda sat on a steel desk cleared of ledgers, her legs crossed, the hem of her Halston jumpsuit riding up her thigh. She was 28, but her eyes held the static of a woman who had stopped counting birthdays the day she realized the calendar was just a list of deadlines. Alberto Bravo stood at the massive window, a silhouette against the dirty glass. He wore a white linen suit that cost more than the warehouse lease, a gold Rolex heavy on his wrist, a smirk permanent on his lips. He was the peacock to her panther. He turned, a vial of white gold pinched between thumb and forefinger, catching the single hanging bulb. "Look at it, mi negra," Alberto said, his voice a smooth baritone that vibrated in the chest. "Snow in July. We are gods, Griselda. We make the weather." She didn't look at the vial. She looked at him. "Gods don't skim, Alberto. Accountants skim. Thieves skim. You are neither." His laugh was a bark, sharp and unafraid. "I borrow. For the lifestyle. For the face we show the world. You think the Colombians in Medellin respect a woman in pants. They respect the Ferrari. They respect the studio keys. I buy our armor. You buy your vanity," she corrected, sliding off the desk. Her heels clicked on the concrete, a metronome counting down. "The ledgers say 3 kilos missing from the last shipment. The chemist says the purity dropped 4 points. That isn't lifestyle, me amor. That is a leak in the hull." He tossed the vial in the air, caught it. "And if I plug the leak with my fingers? If I make the numbers dance? Then you are a circus act," she said, stopping inches from him. She smelled of gun oil and jasmine, a perfume she had designed herself, sweetness masking sulfur. "And I don't employ clowns. I employ killers." He grabbed her waist, pulling her hard against the linen, the gold watch biting into her hip. "Is that what I am? A killer? Or your husband?" She didn't flinch. She placed a hand on his chest, feeling the frantic drum of a heart that thought it was immortal. "You are the only man who ever asked me that question twice. The first time I lied. I said husband. Today. Today you are a liability." He kissed her then, brutal and tasting of cocaine and expensive whiskey. It wasn't a kiss, it was a territorial dispute. She bit his lower lip until blood welled, a copper bloom in the chemical air. He groaned, not in pain, but in the sudden, sharp spike of arousal that violence always triggered in him. "Liability," he murmured against her mouth, shoving her back against the cold metal filing cabinet. "Show me how you handle your liabilities, Griselda. Show me why they call you the Black Widow before the body's even cool. They didn't make love. They collided. Later, they lay on a pallet of shrink-wrapped bricks, the plastic crinkling beneath them like dry leaves. $2 million in product served as their mattress. Alberto smoked a cigarette, the cherry glowing in the dark warehouse, illuminating the scratches on his back, her signature. "You're quiet," he said, exhaling a plume that curled toward the rafters. "Thinking about Carlos." Griselda stared at the ceiling, her hand resting on the cool plastic nearest her fingers. "Carlos is in the ground in Medellin. He is fertilizer for the roses." "I don't think about dirt." "Liar," Alberto said softly. "You loved him. In your way. You loved the way he taught you to count. You loved the way he held your hand while you shook during the first shipment. I loved the utility of him," she said, her voice devoid of inflection. He was a ladder. I climbed. He fell. Physics. And me. He turned on his side, propping his head on a hand heavy with rings. Am I a ladder? Or am I the roof? She turned her head, the movement predatory. You are the mirror, Alberto. You show me exactly what I am. And I hate what I see. Therefore, I must break you. He laughed again, but it cracked at the edges. Then break me. But you'll have to catch me first. He stubbed the cigarette out on a brick of pure white. We have the meet in Bogota Friday. The Mexicans are nervous. They want to see the face of the queen. They want to know if the widow bites. She bites, Griselda said. She also swallows. Bogota in July was a fevered dream of altitude and humidity. The nightclub, El Dorado, throbbed in the Zona T, a cavern of mirrored walls and laser lights cutting through cigarette smoke. The bass wasn't heard. It was felt in the marrow, a second heartbeat imposed on the crowd. Griselda entered through the kitchen, bypassing the velvet rope, the VIP list, the pretense of legality. She wore a white suit, crisp as a shroud, her hair a rigid lacquered helmet. Flanking her were two shadows. Carmen Rivera, compact and watchful, a purse that weighed 20 pounds with a Mac 10 inside, and a new silhouette. He moved differently than the others. No swagger. No need to be seen. Dario Sepulveda. Late 20s, cheekbones carved by a knife fight or genetics, eyes the color of wet river stone. He wore a cheap beige jacket, sleeves pushed to elbows, hands loose at his sides. He didn't look at the women dancing on platforms, didn't look at the lines of powder on the VIP tables. He looked at the exits. He looked at the hands of the waiters. He looked at Griselda's back. Good, she thought. A ghost with a pulse. Alberto was already at the center booth, holding court. He had a model on each knee, blonde, brunette, interchangeable accessories. A mountain of product sat on the glass table beside a bottle of Dom Perignon. He looked up as she approached, and the smirk returned, wider, performative. Me Riene, he shouted over the music, shoving the women aside. They stumbled, giggling, used to the choreography. You're late. The Mexicans think you're a myth. A story men tell to scare their wives. Griselda didn't sit. She stood beside the table, her hand resting on the back of the empty chair. Myths don't bleed, Alberto. I do. Ask your tailors. The Mexicans, two men from Sinaloa, faces hard as obsidian, suits sharp as razors, watched the dynamic with the detachment of surgeons observing a tumor. They knew the numbers. They knew the product. They didn't care about the soap opera. Let's discuss the route change, the older Mexican said, his Spanish slow, deliberate. The Caribbean is hot. DEA has satellites. We go Pacific. Submersibles. Submersibles are for navies, Alberto cut in, waving a dismissive hand. We fly. We always fly. My pilot's my routes. 50-50 split on the risk premium. The risk premium is yours, Griselda said. Her voice cut through the bass, a knife through silk. You lost 3 planes last quarter. You let your cousins fly drunk. My pilots don't drink. My routes are clean. The split is 60-40. My 60, Alberto's jaw tightened. The only tell. The models stopped giggling. Dario shifted his weight, a micro movement that put him between Griselda and the kitchen door. 60-40, Alberto repeated, his voice dropping an octave, dangerous. We built this together. Juntos. You were nothing but a slum rat with a pretty face when I found you. I gave you the world. I gave you New York. I gave you me. The club noise seemed to vanish. The lasers froze. Griselda leaned forward, palms flat on the table, leaning into his space. The white suit blazed under the strobes. You gave me a cage with gold bars, she whispered, for him alone. And you fucked other women in the bed. I paid for while I counted the money you stole. Don't confuse charity with investment, Alberto. I am the bank. You are just the teller. She stood up straight. 60-40. Final. Sign the paper, or the Mexicans leave with my product, and your head stays here as a centerpiece. Alberto's hand vanished under the table. It wasn't a reach for a pen. The movement was instinct, older than thought. Griselda didn't reach for a purse. She didn't scream. Her right hand, resting on the table, simply opened, and a small, matte black .380 PPK appeared in her grip as if it had grown there. She didn't aim at Alberto. She aimed at the Mexican on the left, the one whose hand had also moved toward his waistband. 2 shots. Vut. Vut. Silenced. Surgical. The Mexican slumped sideways, blood arcing silently onto the white tablecloth, a grotesque Pollock. The second Mexican froze, hands rising slowly, eyes wide behind aviators. Alberto's hand came up. Not a gun. A remote detonator. A dead man's switch. Nobody moves, Alberto roared, standing, knocking a model to the floor. Nobody moves or this whole block goes up. Calate Griselda. Put it down. He was sweating now, the linen sticking, the peacock feathers ruffled. He backed away, dragging a weeping blonde by the hair as a shield. You crazy bitch. You killed my contact. You killed the deal. I killed a loose end, she said. Her voice was flat, conversational. The deal is with me. It always was. Dario, Alberto screamed, panic cracking the armor. Dario. Shoot her. Metala. You work for me. I pay you. Dario Sepulveda didn't move. He stood by the kitchen door, a statue in beige. His right hand was inside his jacket. He looked at Alberto. He looked at Griselda. He looked at the dead Mexican. He calculated the trajectory of the rest of his life in the space of a heartbeat. He chooses the queen, Griselda thought, a cold satisfaction blooming in her chest. He chooses the one who pays in respect, not just cash. Dario's hand came out. Not a gun. A phone. He pressed a button, held it to his ear. Limpio, he said into the receiver. Clean. The package is secure. The complication is handled. He hung up. He looked at Griselda. Awaiting orders. Alberto saw the betrayal in the silence. It broke something in his face, something deeper than fear. It was the realization that he was alone in the Hall of Mirrors. You, he breathed. You brought your own executioner to my meeting. I brought my future, Griselda said. She stepped around the table. The other models scrambled away, heels snapping on the tile. Carmen Rivera had the second Mexican in a chokehold, a pistol jammed under his jaw, but she wasn't watching him. She was watching Griselda. Waiting. Alberto backed up until his calves hit the VIP railing. The drop beyond was 20 feet to the dance floor. Griselda. Poor favor. Look at me. Muraim. We are the same. We are the storm. You can't kill the storm. She stopped 3 feet from him. The music had cut. Someone smart killed the power to the booth. The club was a sudden, ringing silence pierced by screams from the main floor. I don't want to kill the storm, Alberto, she said. She reached out, her gloved fingers brushing the lapel of his white suit, brushing the sweat on his neck. I want to own it. You are mine. My mirror. My equal. My husband, she pulled the trigger. The .380 coughed once. A single hole appeared in Alberto's forehead, a neat third eye. He didn't fall backward. He crumpled straight down, folding at the knees, collapsing against her legs, heavy and warm and finally utterly still. She caught him. It was the only tender thing she had done in years. She lowered him to the sticky floor, cradling his head in her lap, the white suit staining red, the gold Rolex ticking its final seconds against her thigh. The screaming from the dance floor grew louder. Sirens wailed in the distance, the Colombian police responding to the panic, not the shots. They never heard the shots. Griselda stroked his hair, matting it with blood. She leaned down, her lips brushing the shell of his ear, whispering past the ringing in her own ears. "Tuyo," she whispered. "You were mine. Sempre tuyo." She stayed there for a long moment, the queen of cocaine kneeling in the blood of her king, the only man who ever matched her darkness. She memorized the weight of him, the cost of him, the price of the reflection. Then she stood up. Her white suit was ruined. Red handprints smeared the lapels, the thighs. She looked at Carmen. "The Mexicans. Gone," Carmen said, wiping her hands on a handkerchief. The survivor ran. "He knows the math. Good. Let him run. He carries the message." She looked at Dario. He stood exactly where he had been, phone pocketed, face blank. He didn't look at the body. He looked at her. Waiting. "Dario," she said. The name felt new in her mouth. "Solid." "Patrona," he replied. The title fit. No irony. No negotiation. "Drive," she said. "We have a shipment leaving Cartagena Tuesday." "I need a pilot who doesn't drink." He nodded once. "The car is out back. Armored. Driver knows the back roads to the airstrip." "Good." She walked toward the kitchen, Carmen falling in step behind her, Dario bringing up the rear. She pushed through the swinging doors into the alley, the night air cold and thin, smelling of rain and exhaust. She didn't look back at the club. She didn't look back at the white linen suit, crumpled on the VIP floor. She lit a cigarette with hands that didn't tremble, the flare illuminating her face, hard, beautiful, ancient. The snow in Queens was pushed by the wind. The blood in Bogotá was washed away by the rain. But the ghost got in the car beside her, silent and loyal, and drove her toward the dawn. 2 down, she thought, watching the city lights blur. 2 mirrors broken. Now, I need a window. Chapter 4. The Queen the heat in Miami didn't breathe, it pressed. It was a wet, heavy blanket thrown over the neon pastel of Collins Avenue, suffocating the Art Deco curves and turning the ocean breeze into a hairdryer gust. But inside the Mutiny Hotel's glass-walled atrium, the air was scrubbed clean and smelled of expensive gardenias, chlorine, and the sharp, metallic tang of money being counted by machines too fast for human fingers. Griselda Blanco Restrepo sat at table 14, the throne in the court of the mutiny. She wore a white linen suit tailored in Medellin, the jacket cut sharp enough to draw blood, her hair a lacquered helmet of black waves. At 40, her face had hardened into a mask of terrifying symmetry, cheekbones like blade edges, eyes the color of wet obsidian, a mouth that knew only 2 expressions, the predatory smile and the flat line of judgment. On the table, a kilo of Peruvian flake sat openly beside a plate of arepas con queso, the white powder forming a miniature Andes range next to the golden corn cakes. No one looked. No one dared. The waiters, Haitian, silent, vetted, refreshed her Tinto coffee without asking. Dadeland was messy, Carmen Rivera said. She didn't sit. Carmen never sat in Griselda's presence unless ordered. She stood at Griselda's right elbow, a ledger clutched against her chest like a shield. Carmen was 50, built like a brick outhouse, her face a roadmap of worry lines and survivor's instincts. She was the only woman in the organization who wasn't a wife, a widow, or a whore. She was the architecture. "Messi is leaving witnesses, Mija," Griselda said, her voice a low purr that vibrated through the hum of conversation around them. She broke off a piece of arepa, chewed slowly. Dadeland was announcement. A quinceanera for the new world. 4 dead in the liquor store. 2 bystanders. The Dade County Sheriff's Office is calling it the Dadeland Massacre on the 6 o'clock news. Carmen pressed, her voice tight. The heat isn't just warm, Griselda. It's nuclear. The feds are bringing in CNTAC. Continuing criminal enterprise statutes. Rika. They don't want your product, they want your head. Griselda finally looked up. Her gaze stripped the varnish off Carmen's anxiety. Let them bring their statutes. I am the statute now. I am the law in this city. Did you move the cash? 3 million wire transferred to Panama via the Vatican bank route. The rest is in the walls of the Hialeah warehouse, vacuum sealed. But the Colombians in New York, Alberto's old crew, they're talking. They say the Godmother has lost her mind. Shooting up a shopping mall in broad daylight. It's bad for business. It's indiscreet. Griselda laughed, a dry, rattling sound. Discretion is for people who ask permission. I don't ask. I build. She stood up, the white linen suit making her look like a bride at a funeral. Come. I want to see the boy. They moved through the atrium, past the parrots screeching in their brass cages, past the dealers in linen suits louder than the birds, past the FBI agents in off-the-rack polyester pretending to drink piña coladas. Griselda moved like a shark in a reef. Everything scattered. Everything went silent in her wake. Up the spiral staircase to the second-floor balcony, where the suites were. Suite 302. The door was unmarked, reinforced steel behind the mahogany veneer. Inside, the air smelled of baby powder, talcum, and something sharper. Antiseptic, maybe, or just the scent of a man trying to be invisible. Dario Sepulveda sat in a wicker chair by the balcony doors, the sheer curtains billowing into the room like ghosts. He wore a white gayabera, sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms roped with functional muscle. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a schoolteacher, or a poet who had wandered into a war by mistake. He held a board book, Where the Wild Things Are, and his voice was a soft, melodic baritone, completely at odds with the cacophony below. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars, and gnashed their terrible teeth, and rolled their terrible eyes, and showed their terrible claws. On the rug, a toddler sat entranced. Michael Corleone Blanco. 2 years old. He had Griselda's eyes, black and bottomless, but Dario's mouth, soft and curious. He wore a tiny Gucci sweater, a grotesque luxury for a child who slept with a loaded .38 under his mattress. A lesson Griselda had insisted on, though Dario had fought her, bitter and silent, for 3 nights until she won. Dario looked up. His face didn't light up. It softened. There is a difference. Lighting up is performance, softening is surrender. Riene, he said. Queen. Not Jeffa. Not Mommy. Riene. It was the only crown she allowed him to place on her head. Griselda didn't smile. She didn't need to. She walked to the rug, the clicking of her heels the only sound, and picked up Michael. He went rigid for a split second, muscle memory, the Trujillo blood, then melted into her, his small hand tangling in her heavy gold necklace. Did he eat? She asked Dario. Everything. The frijoles, the plantains. Even the broccoli. I told him it was little trees for a giant. Dario closed the book, setting it aside with reverence. He asked for you. Donde está mi mamá? Not Jeffa. Mama. The word hit Griselda in a place she had cauterized years ago. Mama. It tasted like copper and honey. She kissed the top of Michael's head, smelling the Johnson's baby shampoo over the gun oil that seemed to permeate the very walls of her life. Good, she said. He learns early. Names have power. Mama makes me human. Jeffa makes me God. He needs to know which one pays for the sweater. He needs to know which one holds him when he screams at night, Dario countered, quiet but immovable. He stood up, wiping his hands on his thighs, a nervous tic, the only tell he had. Griselda, we need to talk. Not about the business. About us. About him. Carmen had stopped at the threshold, a statue of discretion. Griselda waved a hand. Go count the Panamanian wires, Carmen. Make sure the Vatican didn't skim the tithe. If they did, I'll baptize their vaults in fire. Carmen left, the click of the door a final punctuation. Griselda sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, Michael on her lap, the white linen suit pristine against the dark green duvet. She looked at Dario. Really looked. She saw the gray threading his temples, the exhaustion carved into the hollows beneath his eyes. He had been with her 4 years. Bodyguard. Driver. Lover. Husband in everything but the church ceremony she refused to allow. Bad luck to sign contracts with God, Dario. The only contract that matters is the dirt. You want to leave, she said. Not a question. A statement of fact, like reading a ledger entry. I want to live, Dario corrected. He walked to the minibar, poured 2 fingers of Johnny Walker Blue, drank it in one swallow, poured another. I want Michael to live. The Dadeland thing. The heat. Rafa Cardona is moving product through the same channels. The Mexicans are moving in. The Italians are screaming about territory. And now the feds, this woman Hawkins. June Hawkins. She's not like the others. She doesn't want to bust. She wants a dossier. She's building a family tree of us, Griselda. She has photos of Dixon in New York. She has Huber's fingerprints from the 78 bust in Queens. She has me. June Hawkins, Griselda repeated, tasting the name. A woman. A Latina. Interessante. She's dangerous because she thinks like you, Dario said, his back to her, staring out at the turquoise water of Biscayne Bay, where yachts worth more than island nations bobbed at anchor. She sees the pattern. She sees the bodies. She knows about the motorcycle hitmen. She knows you invented them. She's close. Too close. Let her come, Griselda said, her voice dropping an octave, the velvet glove slipping off the steel. I have buried better men than a DEA agent with a notebook. I buried Carlos. I buried Alberto. I will bury Rafa Cardona. I will bury them all. And Michael, Dario whipped around, the glass shattering in his grip, whiskey and blood mixing on the white tile. The sudden violence made Michael flinch, a tiny gasp escaping his throat. Griselda didn't flinch. She stroked the boy's hair, her fingers spider legs on his skull. Michael is the point, Dario. He is the empire. He is the only thing that lasts. Then let him be a boy. Not a soldier. Not a Trujillo. Not a Blanco. Just Michael. Dario sucked in a ragged breath, pressing a napkin to his cut palm. I have a contact in Bogota. A lawyer. Clean. We can set up a trust. A life in the hills. Horses. A school with uniforms and no metal detectors. I'll run the logistics from there. You stay here. You run the kingdom. You visit. We visit. Like normal people. The word normal hung in the air, obscene and impossible. Griselda's eyes went flat, the obsidian hardening into flint. She had heard this song before. Carlos had sung it in Spanish, España, Una vida tranquila. Alberto had sung it in English, Miami Beach, legitimate businesses, laundromats and real estate. They always wanted to turn the river into a swimming pool. They never understood. She was the river. She drowned things. That was her nature. You want to take my son, she whispered. You want to steal him. like a thief in the night. "I want to save him," Dario shouted, the sound cracking in the soundproofed room. "I want to save him from you. From the sons you've already sacrificed. Dixon is a ghost in a $5,000 suit. Hubert is a rage addict with a badge. Ozzy. God help Ozzy. He writes poetry in a world that burns poets. You made them weapons, Griselda. You forged them in fire, and you act surprised when they burn everything they touch. I will not let you forge Michael." Griselda stood up then, slow and deliberate. She handed Michael to the nanny, Maria, a woman who had lost 3 sons to Griselda's wars and stayed because the pay was good and the fear was familiar, who had appeared silently at the door. "Take him to the pool. Watch him. If a shadow moves wrong, shoot it." Maria took the boy. The door closed. Griselda crossed the room. She didn't yell. She didn't strike. She stopped inches from Dario, smelling the whiskey and the blood and the cheap soap he used, because he hated the smell of her expensive French perfumes. She reached up, her hand cupping his jaw, her thumb wiping a smudge of whiskey from his lower lip. "You think I don't know," she murmured. "You think I don't lie awake at 3 a.m. listening to Dixon's silence on the phone, watching Hubert's pupils dilate, reading Ozzy's terrible poems about boys who kiss boys in the dark. I know. I know every fracture. I built the fault lines. Then why?" Dario's voice broke. His eyes dark, liquid, the eyes that had made her lower her guard, the eyes that held her hair back when the chemo ate her alive in 78, the eyes that wrote Heirs me soul, me Luna, me Maldición on napkins and tucked them into her pistol holsters, pleaded with her. "Why keep feeding the machine? Why not stop? Because the machine is me," she said. "And because you are lying." Dario froze. "Lying? About what? About the lawyer in Bogotá." Her thumb pressed harder, digging into the hinge of his jaw. "About the trust. You met him last Tuesday. At the Hotel Tequendama. You didn't discuss a trust. You discussed asylum. You discussed witness protection. You discussed turning state's evidence against me in exchange for a green card and a witness protection stipend for Michael." Dario went pale. The mask of the poet cracked, revealing the hitman underneath. The cold, calculating killer she had recruited in a Bogotá nightclub, while Alberto Bravo bled out on the disco floor. "Who told you? Does it matter? The walls have ears, me Amor. The walls have eyes. The nanny. The driver. The gardener at Hacienda Naples. I pay them more than you ever will. I own them more than you ever will." She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. "You went to the DEA. You sat in a room with June Hawkins. You gave her the routes. The drop houses. The names of the pilots. You sold me for a suburban split level in Ohio. I did it for him," Dario hissed, grabbing her wrists, his grip iron. "I did it so he wouldn't end up like Dixon. So he wouldn't end up in a box before he's 20. You call it betrayal. I call it fatherhood." Griselda didn't struggle. She didn't fight. She went limp in his grasp, her body yielding, soft. The way she knew drove him insane with desire and guilt. She tilted her head up, her lips a breath from his. "Fatherhood," she whispered. Such a pretty word for possession. You want to possess him, Dario. You want to own his future. But you forget. I own the present. And I own the past. And the only way to own the future," she kissed him. Deep. Hungry. Tasting blood and whiskey, and the salt of his fear. Her hand slid down his chest, over the Guyabera, down to the small of his back, where the Sig Sauer rested in its holster. She didn't go for the gun. She went for the cell phone, taped to the inside of his waistband. The burner. The one he used to call the lawyer. The one he used to call her. She pulled it free, holding it up between them, the screen glowing with a draft text message. Hawkins. Miami. Tuesday. 1400. Final terms. Dario stared at the phone. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a terrible, hollow resignation. He sagged, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. I thought if you knew I was serious, you'd let me go. You'd let us go. Griselda cradled the back of his neck, her fingers tangling in the short hair at his nape. She was gentle. Terrifyingly, achingly gentle. Oh, my sweet, stupid Caballo. I would never let you go. You know that. You knew that when you married the Black Widow. The spider doesn't release the fly. She wraps it. She keeps it. She drinks it slow. I love you, he said, broken. Even now. I love the monster. I love the girl in the slums. I love the mother. I love all of it. Please. Just let Michael go. Keep me. Kill me. But let him go. The tenderness was a knife twisting in the only soft organ she had left. For a second, a fraction of a heartbeat, Griselda Blanco, the godmother of cocaine, the butcher of Medellin, the queen of Miami, wanted to say yes. She wanted to pack the Gucci sweater and the board book and the boy with the black eyes and fly to the hills of Bogota and watch him ride horses and grow soft and happy and not hers. Then the moment passed. The obsidian slammed shut. Michael is mine, she said. And you are mine. And the only way to keep what is mine is to bury it. She stepped back. The cold returned to her face, a shutter slamming down. Get out, she said. Go to the hacienda. The jet leaves in an hour. I'll meet you there. We'll talk about the arrangement, the trust, the horses. Dario blinked, hope foolish, desperate, fatal, flaring in his eyes. Really? You'll come. I always come home, Dario. Always. She placed the burner phone on the dresser. Pack the boys' things. The Wild Things book. The sweater. I want him ready. Dario nodded, tears streaming silently down his cheeks, the tears of a man who has just been pardoned. He turned, rushing toward the connecting door to the nursery, already babbling about horses and schools and a life without gunfire. Griselda watched him go. She listened to his footsteps, heavy and eager on the carpet. She waited until the nursery door clicked shut. Then she picked up the landline on the nightstand. She dialed a number memorized in a brain that forgot nothing. Carmen, she said. Her voice was steady, administrative. Change of plans. The hacienda meeting is canceled. Send the motorcycles to the hacienda gates. 2 riders. Black helmets. Black bikes. Target, the driver of the white Range Rover. Passenger, do not touch. Repeat, the boy is sanctified. The father. The father is the message. She listened to Carmen's sharp intake of breath, the only sound of protest the older woman ever allowed herself. Griselda. He is the father of The father of my son tried to sell me to the DEA, Griselda interrupted, her tone flat. He tried to steal my property. I don't negotiate with thieves, Carmen. I execute them. Do it. Clean. Vast. Make it look like the Mexicans. Or Cardona. Make it loud. It will be done. Tonight. Before the sun sets. I want to be there when they bring him back. I want to be the one to tell Michael his father is a hero. A martyr. A ghost, she hung up. The dial tone hummed, a flat line in the quiet room. Griselda walked to the balcony doors. She pulled them open. The heat hit her full force, the smell of salt and diesel and blooming jasmine. Below, the mutiny pool glittered, a turquoise jewel. She saw Maria holding Michael's hand at the edge of the water, the boy laughing as he kicked his feet, sending arcs of chlorine into the air. Dario appeared on the terrace of the nursery suite next door, a duffel bag over his shoulder. He waved up at her, a wide, relieved grin splitting his face. He mouthed the words, "Thank you. Ti quiero. Nos vimos en el paraíso." Griselda raised her hand. She didn't wave. She made a fist, then opened it slowly, letting imaginary sand slip through her fingers. Mine, she thought, watching the boy splash in the blue water, unaware that his father had just been erased from the future. All of you. Mine. Forever. She turned back into the suite, the white linen suit brushing the doorframe. She had work to do. She had an empire to run. She had a poetry book to burn. And she had a son to raise, hard, brilliant, and utterly, completely hers. The Queen of Miami smiled then, a true smile, sharp and red as a wound. The game was getting interesting. Chapter 5. The Widowmaker. The heat in Medellin didn't rise. It settled, a heavy, wet blanket thrown over the Ibarra Valley, trapping the exhaust fumes and the scent of frying arepas and the iron tang of blood that never quite washed out of the cobblestones. From the second-floor balcony of Hacienda Naples, Griselda Blanco Restrepo watched the hippos wallow in the artificial lake, their massive gray bodies submerged up to their eyes, looking like submerged boulders until one yawned, revealing a pink throat wide enough to swallow a man whole. She held a glass of scotch, ice melting fast in the humidity, the condensation dripping onto her fingers like cold sweat. She didn't drink. She just held it, the weight of the crystal grounding her against the vibration humming under her skin. Inside the bedroom, the reel-to-reel recorder spun its brown magnetic tape, eating the minutes of Dario's life. Click. Whir. Hiss. Not asking for permission, Dr. Vargas. I am telling you the flight leaves Tuesday. One way. Bogotá to Madrid. Connecting to Buenos Aires. No return ticket, Dario's voice. Quiet. Controlled. The voice he used when he was handling a nervous mule or a jittery customs officer. The voice he never used with her. With her he was soft. He whispered. He laughed. He read The Little Prince to Michael in a Spanish, accented with the cadence of the Llanos, turning the fox's secret into a lullaby. On ni voit bien quavic liqueur. Elesentil est invisible por les yeux. One sees clearly only with the heart. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Griselda's thumb pressed hard against the rim of the glass, her manicured nail, blood red, sangre de toro, biting into the cuticle until it hurt. Good. Pain was honest. Pain didn't lie. Click. Whir. Hiss. The boy, Michael. He needs a school. A real school. Not tutors who carry Glocks in their briefcases. He needs to ride a bicycle, without a security detail clearing the path first. He needs to forget the sound of a motorcycle engine backfiring. Forget. The word hooked under Griselda's ribs. She walked from the balcony into the suffocating cool of the air-conditioned suite. The recorder sat on the mahogany desk, a tumor of plastic and wire. Beside it, a transcribed stack of papers, typed by Carmen's girls, lay neat and terrifying. Surveillance log, subject Dario Sepulveda. Dates, October 12-18. Vehicle, armored Mercedes 500 SEL, license PLK 444. Bug, magnetomic underside chassis, activated by ignition. She had done it herself. 2 nights ago, in the garage beneath the hacienda, while Dario showered the sweat of the day off his skin, she had slid under the chassis with a flashlight clenched in her teeth, her expensive silk blouse ruined by grease and dirt. She knew the car better than the mechanics. She knew Dario better than he knew himself. Or so she had thought. The transcript blurred. She read the same paragraph for the 10th time. Subject meets with Attorney Vargas at Café El Cielo, El Poblado. Duration, 47 minutes. Audio quality, fair. Subject discusses legal guardianship transfer, international custody laws, Hague Convention exemptions. Key phrase repeated, I have to get my son out. Before it's too late. Before she destroys him. Before she destroys him. The scotch slammed onto the desk, amber liquid splashing over the transcripts, staining the typed words destroy and son and out. The glass didn't break. Nothing ever broke around her, unless she wanted it to. She picked up the microphone attached to the recorder, her finger hovering over the rewind button. She didn't press it. She didn't need to hear it again. The words were etched onto her retinas, burned into the soft tissue of her brain. Get my son out. My son. Mehid. Not our son. My son. The possessive pronoun was a knife slipped between the ribs. After everything. After the blood she had spilled to build the wall around them. After the nights she held him when the chemo poison made her shake, the nights he brushed her hair, the nights he made love to her like she was made of porcelain and light, not cocaine and concrete. After Michael Corleone Blanco, named for a fiction, born into a reality far sharper, took his first steps on this very marble floor. Dario wanted to steal the masterpiece. The door to the suite opened without a knock. Carmen Rivera entered, smelling of agua de Florida and cigarette smoke, her face a map of worry lines she tried to powder over. She carried a silver tray with a fresh bottle of Macallan and a clean glass. She didn't ask. She knew. Jeffa, Carmen said, setting the tray down with surgical precision. The plane is fueled. The pilot says the storm over the Caribbean might delay us 2 hours if we don't leave by noon. Griselda didn't turn. She stared at the hippos. One had climbed onto the bank, shaking water from its hide, terrifying in its bulk, utterly indifferent to the world around it. Cancel the flight, Carmen. Jeffa, the indictment is paper, Griselda said, her voice devoid of inflection, a flat line on a heart monitor. Paper burns. Paper rots. Dario is trying to take the foundation. Carmen froze. The only sound was the whir click of the recorder reaching the end of the reel, the tape flapping uselessly against the plastic hub. Flap. 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 Like a dying bird. He went to a lawyer, Griselda continued, finally turning. Her eyes were dry, laser bright. He thinks he can negotiate. He thinks there is a judge in Buenos Aires or Madrid who gives a damn about the Hague Convention when the mother is La Madrina. He thinks he can cut the wire and walk away with the electricity still humming. He loves the boy, Carmen said quietly. It was the only defense that mattered. The only one that ever had. He loves you. In his way. He's tired, Griselda. We're all tired. The war with Papo Mejia's cousins, the DEA surveillance on Collins Avenue. June Hawkins has a hard-on for this organization the size of the Andes. Dario sees the walls closing in. He wants the kid safe. Safe, Griselda repeated. The word tasted like arsenic. There is no safe. There is only mine. He knows that. He knew it when he put the ring on my finger. He knew it when he held the gun for me in Bogota, while I emptied my clip into Alberto. He knew the contract, until death do us part. Not until the DEA gets close. Not until you get tired of the room service. Death, she walked to the desk, picked up the wet transcripts. The ink ran, bleeding blue tears down the white paper. He didn't come to me, she whispered. He didn't kneel and say, Griselda, I'm afraid. Help me. He went to a lawyer. A man in a cheap suit who bills by the hour. He tried to steal my property through a loophole. Michael is not property, Carmen said, steel entering her voice. He is a child. 5 years old. He has your eyes. He has Dario's hands. He wets the bed when the thunder sounds like gunfire. Griselda's hand shot out, gripping Carmen's wrist. The grip was bruising, the bones grinding. He is my continuity. He is the only thing that lives when I stop breathing. And Dario thinks he can put him on a plane and erase me. Make me a footnote in a custody agreement. She released Carmen, shoving her back a step. No. The contract stands. Hasta quella muerte nos separe. Griselda, please. Carmen used the first name. The nuclear option. Don't do this. Not here. Not in front of the boy. If you do this, if you break him, you break the last human thing in you. And I need you human, Jeffa. I need you. The business needs you. The boys in Miami, Dixon, Uber, Ozzy, they need the godmother, not the Black Widow. Griselda smiled then. A terrible thing. A stretching of lips over teeth. The Black Widow is the godmother, Carmen. The spider doesn't weave the web to catch flies. She weaves it to keep the male close. And when he tries to crawl away, she injects the venom. She liquefies his insides. She drinks him down until he is part of her forever. She picked up the phone on the desk. A direct line to the garage. To the motorcycles. Prepare the red Yamaha, she said into the receiver. Her voice was calm, administrative. 2 riders. Helmets black. Visors down. Target, white Mercedes, license PLK 444. Route, Cara 43A, near the country club. Time, 14:00 hours. Confirm visual on passenger side. Child restraint seat. Do not shoot the child. Repeat. Do not shoot the child. She hung up. The dial tone hummed, clean and innocent. Carmen, Griselda said, picking up her handbag, a Hermes Birkin the color of dried blood. Pack Michael's bags. He travels with me. Tonight. We go to California. Irvine. The house on Turtle Rock Drive. And Dario, Griselda looked at the hippo again. It had opened its mouth wide, a yawn or a threat displaying tusks that could snap a crocodile in half. Dario stays, she said. He becomes part of the landscape. A monument. The husband who loved me enough to die for the boy. The only one who ever really did. The hit was clinical. A masterpiece of the engineering she had pioneered. 2 Yamaha XD 600s, red as arterial blood, splitting the traffic on Carrera 43A. The drivers wore black helmets, visors opaque. The passengers, paraleros, wore leather gloves and held Ingram Mac 10s with suppressors that coughed fut-fut-fut like a man clearing his throat. Dario's white Mercedes was stopped at the light, the afternoon sun glinting off the armor-plated windows. He was wearing a linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, one arm draped casually over the steering wheel. He looked bored. He looked like a man waiting for a green light to take him to a dentist appointment. In the passenger seat, strapped into a Recaro child seat, Michael Corleone Blanco, age 5, held a plastic dinosaur. A T-Rex. Green. He was making a quiet rower sound, moving the toy along the window frame. The light turned green. The motorcycles didn't accelerate. They converged. Vut, 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 vut. The sound was obscenely quiet. A violation of physics. The driver's side window exploded inward, spiderwebbing before disintegrating. Dario's head snapped. The linen shirt bloomed red, dark flowers opening across the chest, the shoulder, the neck. He didn't scream. There was no time for sound. His foot slammed the brake pedal, the Mercedes lurching, the engine stalling. The second paralero leaned over the handlebars, the Mac 10 chattering again. Vut, vut, vut. Shots through the windshield, upward angle ensuring the kill. Insurance. The motorcycles were gone before the Mercedes. Horns started blaring. a long, dying moan pinned by the steering wheel lock of Dario's slumped body. Inside the car, the air conditioning still hissed, blowing cool air over a hot crime scene. Michael didn't cry. He sat in the spray of his father's life, warm and sticky on his face, his arms, his green dinosaur. The glass dust sparkled in his eyelashes like fairy dust. He blinked, slow and deliberate, clearing the red mist. He looked at his father. Dario's eyes were open, staring at the rearview mirror, seeing nothing. The man who read him stories. The man who smelled of leather and soap. The man who taught him how to hold a knife, for cutting fruit, always fruit, and how to hold a gun for safety, never safety. Michael turned his head. He looked at the sidewalk, at the crowd gathering. Screaming women. Men pulling phones. A vendor dropping his empanada cart. And then, through the heat haze, through the smoke and the chaos, he saw her. Standing on the balcony of the country club restaurant, 300 yards away. A woman in a white linen suit. Red nails holding a glass. Red lips. Dark glasses. She raised the glass in a toast. She didn't flinch. She didn't turn away. She watched the life drain out of the man she had loved with a tenderness that had terrified her, the only man who had ever touched her without taking. Michael, 5 years old, covered in his father, raised his green dinosaur. He didn't wave. He didn't cry. He saluted. The funeral was a circus. A grotesque, expensive circus. Jardins de Paz Cemetery. The elite of Medellin's underworld in black designer suits and sunglasses, pressing close to the open grave, not to mourn, but to measure the vacancy. To see who stepped into the space Dario left. Griselda wore black Chanel. A veil. The costume of the widow. She had worn it twice before. She knew the choreography by heart. She stood at the head of the casket, mahogany, lined with white silk, sealed. No viewing. There wasn't enough left of Dario's face to view. She had made sure of that. The paraleros had been thorough. She had paid them double for thoroughness. Michael stood beside her. He wore a tiny black suit, a clip-on tie. His hair was combed. His face was scrubbed clean, though Griselda knew. She knew that the water in the tub had run pink for an hour. He hadn't spoken since the car. Not a word. Not mama. Not papa. Not why. He held her hand. His fingers were small, cold, sticky with something that wasn't soap. She didn't pull away. She squeezed back, hard, anchoring him to the earth, anchoring herself to the only thing left that was hers. Father Gomez droned on. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, Griselda's eyes scanned the tree line. She saw the glint of binoculars. June Hawkins. La Gringa. Standing by a jacaranda tree, notebook in hand, watching the godmother bury her third husband. The hunter. The only man, woman, Griselda couldn't buy, couldn't kill, couldn't fuck. June, Griselda thought, her lips not moving. You want to know the secret. You want the profile. Here it is. I didn't kill him because he betrayed me. I killed him because he was leaving. And the only way to keep a man is to bury him. The priest sprinkled holy water. Dust to dust. Ashes to ashes. The casket lowered. The mechanical whir of the winch was the loudest sound in the cemetery. Griselda reached into her purse. Not for a tissue. For a single, long-stemmed red rose. Sangue de Toro. She dropped it into the dark hole. It fell straight, landing on the sealed lid. Goodbye, me Amor, she whispered, the words meant only for the dirt. You are mine now. Forever. No lawyer can take you. No plane can carry you away. You are mine, she felt a tug on her hand. She looked down. Michael was staring up at her. His eyes, her eyes, black and fathomless, held no tears. They held a calculation so ancient and cold it made her stomach turn over, a lurch of recognition so violent it was almost pride. He didn't say mama. He didn't say papa. He opened his small hand. In his palm lay the green plastic T-Rex. One of its tiny arms had been snapped off. The break was clean. Sharp. He held it out to her. An offering. A tribute. Griselda took the broken dinosaur. She closed her fingers around it, the plastic digging into her palm. "Let's go, mi vida," she said, her voice loud enough for the mourners, for the cameras, for June Hawkins taking notes under the jacaranda. "We have a plane to catch. The world is waiting." She turned, the veil swinging, the black Chanel rustling. She walked away from the grave, pulling the boy behind her, the broken dinosaur clutched in her fist like a grenade pin. Behind her, the first shovelful of dirt hit the mahogany lid. Thud. The sound of the contract sealing. The Learjet 35A climbed through the storm clouds over the Caribbean, punching into the clear, freezing blue of the stratosphere. Griselda sat in the aft cabin, a glass of Macallan 25 in hand, the seal broken, the amber liquid swirling. She drank this time. She drank deep, the burn cleaning the taste of cemetery dirt from her throat. Carmen sat across from her, strapped in, reading a financial report on the Miami distribution network. She didn't look up. She knew better than to offer condolences. She knew better than to ask. Michael sat in the forward cabin with the nanny, a woman named Rosa who crossed herself every time the plane hit turbulence. Griselda had bugged the forward cabin, too. She listened to the static of the intercom, waiting for a word. A cry. A whisper. Silence. Good. The phone in the cabin rang. Satellite link. Secure line. Griselda picked up. Blanco, Jeffa, it was Rafa. Rafa Cardona. Her rival. Her shadow. Her would-be executioner. He was in a safe house in Envigado, his voice tight with adrenaline. It's done. Dario is planted. But there's a complication. Griselda swirled the scotch. Complications are for people who plan to fail, Rafa. I don't fail. The DEA. Hawkins. She was at the cemetery. She took photos of the boy. The kid looked at her. He didn't cry, Jeffa. He looked at her. Like he was memorizing her face. Griselda's grip on the glass tightened. Let her look. Let her memorize. She's chasing ghosts, Rafa. And I just made the biggest ghost of all. She's filing the RICO indictment tomorrow. Miami grand jury. They have the ledgers from the Queen's warehouse. They have Carmen's cousin. He flipped. He gave up the laundry routes. The Mutiny Hotel is wired. The walls are coming down. Then we burn the house, Griselda said. We go to California. We disappear into the sunshine. The product moves. The money moves. I am the godmother, Rafa. I don't run from the fire. I am the fire, she hung up. She looked out the window. The clouds below were a white ocean, glowing in the moonlight. No land. No borders. Just the white foam of the world unspooling beneath her. She unbuckled her seatbelt. She walked to the forward cabin. Rosa the nanny slept, head lolling. The intercom buzzed with static. Michael sat in the leather captain's chair, his feet not reaching the floor. He was strapped in. He held the green dinosaur, three-legged now, the other arm snapped off too. Symmetry. He sensed her before he saw her. He turned his head. The face was a mask. Perfect. Porcelain. Griselda's face. He didn't smile. He didn't reach for her. He held up the broken dinosaur. The two pieces. He clicked them together. Click. He pulled them apart. Click. Together. Apart. Click. 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 Assembly. Disassembly. Assembly. Disassembly. The only way to keep the pieces was to break them so they couldn't leave. Griselda stood in the doorway of the cockpit, the roar of the engines, a deafening silence in her ears. She looked at her son, her property, her legacy, her ghost in training, and for the first time in her life, Griselda Blanco Restrepo felt a shiver of something that wasn't power. It was fear. She walked to him, the plane banking hard toward the northwest, toward California, toward the cage she would build for them both. She sat in the co-pilot's seat, reaching over to buckle the belt across her chest. "Put the toy away, Michael," she said, her voice steady, the voice of the Queen. "We land in 3 hours. You need to sleep. Tomorrow we start over." Michael clicked the dinosaur's head off. Snap. "Okay, Mama," he said. It was the first word he had spoken in 2 days. His voice was flat, devoid of inflection. A flat line on a heart monitor. Griselda stared straight ahead, into the blinding white of the clouds, and drank the rest of the scotch in one long, burning swallow. Click. Whir. Hiss. The tape recorder in the hacienda, thousands of miles below, reached the end of the reel. The tape flapped against the plastic hub in the empty, air-conditioned room. Flap. 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 The sound of a heart beating in a vacuum. Chapter 6. The cage, the handcuffs were cold, a trivial sensation against the furnace of her wrists, but Griselda Blanco Restrepo noticed everything. She noticed the tremor in the young FBI agent's fingers as he snapped the ratchet, too tight, deliberately so. She noticed the smell of the Irvine ranch house, lemon furniture polish, stale cigarette smoke, and underneath it all, the copper tang of her own adrenaline, ancient and familiar. She noticed the way the morning light sliced through the vertical blinds, striping the shag carpet in gold and shadow. She did not struggle. She did not scream. She straightened her spine, adjusting the silk of her blouse, a pale yellow, chosen deliberately for the cameras she knew were waiting at the end of the driveway. La Madrina did not wear stripes. She wore armor. "Mrs. Restrepo," the lead agent said, his voice amplified by the bullhorn he hadn't needed. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to import cocaine, racketeering, and 3 counts of murder for hire." 3 counts. Only 3. A bureaucratic reduction of a trilogy of corpses. Carlos in the past. Alberto in blood. Dario in the sunlight of Medellin, his brains painting the windshield while Michael screamed in the backseat. Griselda tilted her head, a bird assessing a snake. "You missed a few," she said. Her voice was a husky whisper, ruined by cigarettes and command. "But we have time. The state of California is patient. The federal government is forever." She walked out of the house like a queen exiting a palace she had already burned down. The press corps was a wall of noise and flashbulbs. The Black Widow. The Godmother. The Cocaine Queen. She smiled for them, a tight, red-lipped rictus that didn't reach her eyes. She gave them the headline, Griselda Blanco arrested in Irvine raid. She denied them the satisfaction of fear. The Federal Correctional Institution, Dublin, sat in the Golden Hills east of San Francisco, a campus of low-slung buildings surrounded by chain link and razor wire that looked flimsy against the vastness of the California sky. It was a minimum security facility, a club fed for white-collar criminals and political prisoners, but the unit Griselda inhabited, administrative segregation, the SHU, was a different country. Concrete. Steel. Fluorescent light that hummed like a trapped insect, 24 hours a day. No sun. No moon. Just the gray, pulsing now. Her cell was 6 feet by 9. A stainless steel toilet sink combination. A steel bunk with a 3-inch foam mattress. A thin blanket that smelled of industrial detergent and other women's nightmares. Griselda paced. 3 steps. Turn. 3 steps. Turn. Her heels clicked on the concrete, the only rhythm in the silence. She had run an empire that moved tons of white powder a week, laundered billions through Panamanian banks and Miami real estate, commanded armies of sicarios on motorcycles who could put a bullet in a target's temple at 40 miles an hour. Now, her universe was measured in paces. The heavy steel door buzzed. The slot at the bottom slid open. A tray appeared. Gray meat, green beans, a carton of milk, a plastic spork. Visitor, the guard said. A woman's voice. Board. Legal visit. Room 4. Griselda didn't move. Tell them I don't need a lawyer. I need a tailor. This jumpsuit cuts the circulation off at the ankles. Stand by the door, inmate 54,821,004. Hands on your head, she complied. The door buzzed open. She was cuffed behind the back, standard protocol for the woman who invented the motorcycle drive-by. The walk to the visitation room was a gauntlet of stairs. The other inmates, mostly women serving time for fraud or low-level muling, pressed against the mesh of their cell doors. They knew her name. They whispered Viuda Negra as she passed. She did not look at them. She looked at the guards. She memorized their badge numbers, their shift changes, the way the tall one favored his left knee. The visitation room was a sterile box with a long metal table bolted to the floor. A thick pane of scratched plexiglass divided it. Black telephones hung on either side like dead birds. June Hawkins sat on the other side. She looked different out of the Mutiny Hotel's neon glow. Older. The sharp bob had grown out, streaked with gray at the temples. She wore a beige trench coat over a cream sweater, practical, expensive but unflashy. Her hands were folded on the table, manicured but short. Agent June Hawkins. CNTAC. The hunter who had chased the ghost for a decade. Griselda sat. She picked up the receiver. The plastic was warm. June picked up hers. Mrs. Blanco, June said. Her voice was clear, transmitted through the wire. No static. Or is it Restrepo? Trujillo. Bravo. Sepulveda, Griselda smiled. It was a real smile this time, sharp and cold. You've done your homework, Mija. Impressive. Most men just look at the mugshot and see a grandmother. I see a defendant facing 3 life sentences plus 200 years, June said. She didn't smile back. RICO, continuing criminal enterprise, the 3 murders. The Dadeland massacre is a state case, but the feds are happy to let Florida take a swing if we miss. Florida has the electric chair, Griselda noted. Old Sparky. They say the smoke smells like bacon. We're not in Florida yet. We're in a federal box in Dublin. And right now, I'm the only friend you have. Griselda laughed, a dry, rattling sound. A friend. You put me here. You flipped Papo's ghost, Rafa Cardona. You turned my contador, my drivers. You buried me in paper. I built a case, June corrected. Evidence. Witnesses. The rule of law. Law, Griselda spat the word. Law is just the rules the winners write to keep the losers losing. I wrote my own rules for 20 years. I was the law in Medellin. I was the law in Queens. I was the law in Miami. You were a cancer in Miami, June said softly. You turned a paradise into a shooting gallery. 200 murders a year at your peak. Children hit by stray bullets. The Mutiny Hotel lobby looked like the OK Corral. Progress requires demolition, Griselda said. She leaned forward, the the plexiglass the only barrier between them. And you. You watched. You took notes. You ran your little wires. You sent your UC agents in linen suits to buy ounces from my boys. You loved it. Admit it, Agent Hawkins. You loved the chase. You loved me. June's face didn't flicker. I loved the job. I loved stopping you. Liar! Griselda's voice dropped, intimate, conspiratorial. You sat in that car on Collins Avenue for nights on end. Watching my window. Watching me swim. Watching Dario bring me coffee. You knew my rhythms better than my own son's. You knew I took 2 sugars, no cream. You knew I read The Godfather every year on the anniversary of Carlos's death. You knew I cried when Ozzy died, even if no one saw the tears. June was silent for a long moment. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the gap. I knew you were human, June said finally. That makes you dangerous. Not a monster. Monsters are simple. You're complicated. Complicated. Griselda repeated the word like a curse. Dario called me complicated. Right before he tried to steal my son. Dario Sepulveda wanted to leave, June said. He wanted to take Michael to Colombia. He wanted out of the life. That's not stealing. That's surviving. Griselda's hand gripped the receiver until the knuckles turned white, the only violence she could currently enact. He belonged to me. I built him. I took a Sicario from the slums and made him a consort. I gave him the wing at Naples. I gave him the horses. I gave him a son named after the greatest fiction ever written. Michael Corleone. He was mine. You don't leave ownership. You don't negotiate possession. You ordered a hit on the father of your child in front of the child, June said. The clinical tone cracked, just a fraction. Michael was 5. He was covered in his father's blood. You did that. I saved him, Griselda hissed. I saved him from weakness. I saved him from a father who would teach him to run. Michael doesn't run. Michael is a Blanco. He will survive because he knows the truth. The only loyalty is the loyalty you enforce. He's a ward of the state now, June said. His brothers are dead. The words hung in the air, heavier than the steel door. Griselda blinked. Once. Dead, Dixon. Shot in a nightclub in Medellin. 6 months ago. Uber. Stabbed in a prison yard fight in Bogota. 3 months ago. Osvaldo. Drive-by execution in Miami. 6 weeks ago, the hum of the lights grew louder. Griselda stared at June. She searched the other woman's face for triumph, for pity, for the slightest crack of satisfaction. There was nothing. Only a flat, weary witness. All 3, Griselda whispered. My army. My legacy. My hombres. They died the way they lived, June said. In the war you started. You outlived them, Griselda. You buried your husband. You buried your 3 sons. You're 60 years old in a federal cage. Who won? Griselda let go of the receiver. It swung on its cord, clattering against the plexiglass. She stood up. Her knees didn't buckle. Her back didn't bend. She smoothed the orange jumpsuit over her hips. I haven't lost, she said. I'm just consolidating. She turned and walked back to the door. The guard buzzed it open before she reached it. Mrs. Blanco, June called out behind the glass. Griselda paused, her hand on the frame. She didn't turn around. You have a visitor next week, June said. Your son. Michael. He's 12 now. He's asked to see you. Griselda's fingers tightened on the door frame, the only tell. Michael, he has questions, June said. He wants to know why. Griselda finally turned. Her face was a mask of carved stone, eyes black and fathomless. Tell him I'm writing the answers down. Tell him to read the letters. Tell him to trust the product. She walked out. The door slammed shut with a pneumatic hiss that sounded like a final breath. Solitary confinement is designed to break the mind. No clocks. No calendars. Just the light and the dark and the relentless inventory of the self. Griselda didn't break. She catalogued. She paced the perimeter. 3 steps. Turn. 3 steps. Turn. She counted the cracks in the concrete, 47. She memorized the guard rotation, shift change at 600, 1400, 2200. The tall one with the bad knee, Officer Miller, always late by 3 minutes. She exercised until her calves ached and her knuckles bled on the concrete walls. Push-ups, squats, burpees. She kept the machine oiled. But at night, when the hum of the lights was the only lullaby, she wrote. She had no paper, no pens. Contraband. But she had the indentation of the plastic spork, and she had the back of the commissary forms she was allowed to keep, 1 per week. She wrote in the dust on the steel desk bolted to the wall. She wrote in the condensation on the toilet tank. She wrote in her head vast libraries of prose that she would never speak aloud. To Michael, they tell me you are 12. A man grown in the eyes of the law, a baby in the eyes of God. I do not believe in God. I believe in the product. The product is pure. The product does not lie. The product does not leave. The product does not look at another woman. The product does not ask for a divorce, or a visa, or a plane ticket to Spain. The product stays in the kilo until you move it. The product turns into money. Money turns into power. Power turns into forever. Your brothers, Dixon, Huber, Ozzy, they forgot the product. They fell in love with the noise. The guns, the women, the flash. They thought the empire was theirs because they carried my name. They were wrong. The empire belongs to the one who holds the weight. Your father, Dario. He loved the smell of the rain on the hot asphalt in Medellin. He loved the horse I gave him, Relampago. He loved you. But he loved leaving more. He wanted to take you away from me. He wanted to make you soft. Softness is death, Michael. Remember that. The world eats the soft. I killed Carlos because he wanted to retire. Retirement is surrender. I killed Alberto because he wanted to share. Sharing is dilution. I killed Dario because he wanted to leave. Leaving is betrayal. Do not trust men. They want to own you or be you. Do not trust women. They want to save you or destroy you. Trust only the product. The product is the only honest thing in the world. It demands respect. It rewards precision. It never asks why. I am writing this in the dark, on a wall that sweats. But the words are steel. They will reach you. I will make sure of it. Your mother, Griselda, she mailed the letter by memorizing it, reciting it to the cockroach that lived behind the toilet, entrusting it to the only listener who wouldn't betray her. The visits from June Hawkins became a ritual. Tuesdays and Thursdays. 1 hour. No lawyers. Just the 2 women and the scratched plexiglass. The dynamic shifted. The interrogation ended. The confession began. June brought files. Transcripts. Wiretap logs. Photos of the Dadeland crime scene. Photos of the Medellin morgue. She laid them on the table like tarot cards. Tell me about Papo Mejia, June said one afternoon. The air in the visitation room was thick, recycled, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. The first one. The boy in the slums. Griselda picked up the receiver. Her nails were filed to perfect points, maintained by a contraband emery board she'd traded 3 dessert trays for. Papo is not in the file, Agent Hawkins. Papo is before the file. Papo is before the law. He's the key, June insisted. The profile says you replicate him. Carlos was the provider, like Papo wanted to be. Alberto was the partner in crime, like Papo was. Dario was the protector, like Papo died trying to be. You've been marrying the same ghost for 30 years. Griselda was silent. She watched a fly crawl across the plexiglass on June's side. Thwack. A guard's rolled-up magazine. The fly fell, legs twitching. He didn't die trying, Griselda said quietly. He died because he looked at a Don's woman. He died because he was beautiful and stupid and 15. I killed the Don's son with a rock. I smashed his face until it was wet meat. I didn't cry for Papo. I cried for the waste of it. A good knife, dull from cutting air. Did you love him? The question hung there, brutal in its simplicity. Griselda looked at June. Really looked. This woman, she thought. This woman has seen the mountain of skulls I built. She has climbed it. She stands on the summit with me, breathing the thin air. Love, Griselda said, is a word people use to describe the hunger before they eat. I ate Papo. I consumed him. He is in my blood. He is in the way I hold a gun. He is in the way I cut a kilo. He is in the name I gave my youngest son, Michael Corleone. Because Michael Corleone buried his father, too. He buried him in the garden. He became the godfather so he wouldn't have to be the son. You're not Michael Corleone, June said. Michael Corleone died alone in a courtyard, choking on an orange. You're still talking. Because I haven't finished eating, Griselda said. And neither have you, June frowned. Me. I'm retiring in 6 months. Pension. A boat and the keys. Maybe a dog. You won't last on the boat, Griselda predicted. You'll miss the hum. You'll miss the hunt. You'll miss me. June laughed, a short, surprised bark. I miss you like a dentist misses a root canal. Liar, Griselda whispered. You're the only one who visits. My lawyers send associates. My money sends accountants. My sons send. Nothing. They're dust. You're the only one who sits across the glass and doesn't flinch when I show you the teeth. June leaned her forehead against the plexiglass. The gesture was startlingly intimate. Griselda's breath hitched, the only involuntary reaction she'd allowed in years. You're dying, June said softly. The medical records I subpoenaed. The ovarian cancer. Stage 4. You have months. Maybe a year. Griselda pulled back, the mask sliding back into place, seamless as mercury. We are all dying, Mija. Since the moment we are born. I just have a schedule now. Does it scare you? June asked. The dark. The silence. The final loss of control. Griselda smiled. It was a terrifying thing, all teeth and no warmth. Control is an illusion, Agent Hawkins. I learned that when I was 11, and a man put a gun to my head, and I didn't blink. I learned it when Carlos choked on his wine. I learned it when Alberto's blood sprayed my face. I learned it when Dario's skull cracked open next to my son. She tapped the glass between them. The only control is the narrative. The story you leave behind. I am writing mine now. In letters to a boy who hates me. In conversations with a cop who understands me. I am building a monument that isn't made of concrete or hippos or blood money. She leaned close to the phone, her voice dropping to a hiss that vibrated through the wire. I am building a cemetery, June. A private cemetery. 4 mausoleums. Carlos. Alberto. Dario. Me. Side by side. Forever. No one leaves. No one betrays. No one grows old and ugly and soft. They are perfect there. They are mine. That is the only victory. Not the money. Not the power. The keeping. June didn't pull away. She stayed pressed to the glass, her eyes locked on Griselda's, two predators recognizing the same scar tissue. You're a monster, June said. A brilliant, broken, terrifying monster. And you, Griselda replied, raising a hand to press her palm flat against the cold plexiglass, mirroring June's position on the other side, inches apart, separated by bulletproof plastic and the weight of the law. You are the only one who ever looked into the cage and didn't run. The only one who stayed for the feeding. I stayed for the truth, June corrected. Truth is just the story the survivor tells, Griselda said. And I am the only one left to tell it. The red light above the door blinked. Time expired. The guard's voice boomed over the intercom. Visit concluded. Inmate 54,821-004, step away from the partition. Griselda didn't move. She held June's gaze through the plastic. She didn't hang up the phone. Next Tuesday, she mouthed. Silent. A promise. A command. June nodded, almost imperceptibly. Next Tuesday. Griselda hung up the receiver. It clicked into the cradle with finality. She turned, squared her shoulders, and walked back into the gray, humming dark of the cage, the only place in the world where she was finally, absolutely safe. Chapter 7. The thesis, the fluorescent lights of the Federal Correctional Institution, Dublin, didn't flicker anymore. They had long since surrendered to a steady, anesthetic hum, a white noise that Griselda Blanco Restrepo had listened to for 20 years. It was the sound of the state winning. The sound of time collapsing into a flat, gray line. She lay in the medical unit bed, a private room granted not by mercy, but by the bureaucratic embarrassment of a dying godmother. The cancer had eaten the iron out of her blood and the meat from her bones. She weighed 83 pounds, a bird skeleton wrapped in translucent, bruised skin. The famous hair, once a cascade of black oil she wore like a cape, was a wispy halo of white, sparse enough to reveal the blue roadmap of veins on her scalp. The only color in the room came from the bouquet of plastic flowers on the nightstand. Red roses, dust-laden. A guard had brought them from the lobby vending machine 3 weeks ago. Griselda hadn't asked for them. She hadn't asked for anything in months, not since the morphine drip became a permanent resident in the crook of her elbow. The door buzzed. The heavy steel groaned open. She didn't turn her head. She tracked the entrance by the displacement of air, the change in the room's pressure. The scent arrived before the footsteps. Expensive hand cream, Jergens, cherry almond, stale coffee, and the distinct metallic tang of a woman who had carried a badge for 30 years and never quite washed the adrenaline off. June Hawkins. She wore civilian clothes now. A beige trench coat over a cream sweater. Her hair, once a severe, regulation bob, fell in soft, graying waves. She looked tired in the way mountains look tired, eroded, permanent. She carried a leather satchel, worn thin at the straps. The guard, a kid with acne scars and a tattoo peeking above his collar, hovered. 10 minutes, Smith. Hawkins. Doctor's orders. She's fragile. June didn't look at him. Her eyes, dark and fathomless, were locked on the bed. I'll need 20. And send the coffee. The real kind, not the brown water you people drink. The kid hesitated, intimidated by the quiet authority in her voice, the ghost of 1,000 interrogation rooms. Ma'am, regulations. Regulations, June said, finally glancing at him, a flash of gold badge in her eyes though she wore none. I wrote half the regulations on high-value targets. Get the coffee. Black. 2 sugars. And close the door on your way out. The door slammed. The lock engaged. A heavy, final thunk. Silence rushed back in, thicker than before. June moved to the vinyl chair beside the bed. She didn't sit immediately. She stood over Griselda, looking down at the ruin of the woman who had once ordered the death of a 2-year-old child because the father owed $6,000. The woman who had turned Miami into a slaughterhouse and called it commerce. Griselda's eyes opened. They were the same. Cataracts clouded the edges. The whites were yellowed by liver failure, but the pupils, black, dilated, bottomless, were unchanged. They held the same terrifying calculation. The shark's gaze. I see you. I weigh you. I decide if you're meat or threat. June, Griselda whispered. The voice was paper dragging over sand. You came to watch me rot. I came to see you die, June corrected gently. She sat, the vinyl sighing under her. There's a difference. One is spectacle. The other is witness. A dry, rattling sound erupted from Griselda's chest. A laugh. Witness. Testigo. You always liked the legal words. They make you feel clean. I am clean, Griselda. Relatively speaking. You're the one who's dirty. Always were. Griselda's lips curled, a rictus of a smile. Relatively speaking. I like that. We are all relative. Relatively evil. Relatively good. Relatively dead. She turned her head slowly, the neck tendons straining against the pillow. The effort cost her a sharp intake of breath. Her hand, claw-like, veins bursting blue against the wrist, lifted from the blanket. It trembled in the air between them, an offering or a threat. Touch me, Griselda commanded. Before the nurses come with the sponge and the basin. Touch me like you meant it, in the visiting room. Like you weren't a cop, June didn't flinch. She didn't reach for her notebook. She didn't reach for a recorder. The leather satchel stayed, zipped at her feet. Slowly, deliberately, June removed her right glove. Leather peeled back to reveal a hand lined by age, knuckles swollen from arthritis, nails trimmed short and unpainted. A working hand. A honest hand. She placed it over Griselda's claw. The contact was electric. A circuit closing after 2 decades of open wire. Griselda's fingers, cold as marble, clamped down. Not hard, she lacked the strength, but with a desperate, locking tension. Mine, the grip said. You are mine now. The only one left. I buried them all, June, Griselda whispered, her gaze boring into June's face. Carlos in the dirt behind the finca. Alberto in the gutter in Bogotá, his brains mixing with the rain. Dario on the asphalt in Medellin, my son's shoe scraping his brain matter. Dixon. Uber. Ozzy. 3 sons. 3 bullets. 3 knives. 3 cars exploding. I buried them all. I know, June said. Her voice was steady, an anchor. I read the files. I saw the photos. I watched the autopsy report stack up on my desk. No, Griselda shook her head, a violent, jerky motion. You read. You didn't see. You didn't smell the formaldehyde they pump into them in Miami to hide the rot. You didn't feel the weight of the lid closing. Click. Final. A contract that cannot be breached. She coughed, a wet, tearing sound. June waited, patient as stone, her thumb tracing a slow circle on the back of Griselda's hand. A gesture of comfort so alien to this woman it felt like a violation of physics. Why? June asked. The question she had asked 100 times in 100 visits. The question that had kept her awake in cheap hotel rooms from Miami to D.C. You had Carlos for the empire. Alberto for the fire. Dario for the peace. Why kill the peace? Griselda's eyes drifted to the ceiling. The acoustic tiles were stained with water damage. A map of neglect. Peace, she spat the word. You think I wanted peace. Peace, is for people who have something to lose that isn't already gone. Peace is for women who didn't have to kill their first lover at 12 years old to prove they weren't a whore. Papo Megia, June said. The name hung in the air, heavy as a corpse. Griselda flinched. Just a microscopic tightening around the eyes. The ghost. The only one I didn't kill. The only one the world took from me before I could decide he was mine to keep. You loved him, June stated. Not a question. I owned him, Griselda hissed, a sudden flare of the old fire. We were children in La Catalina. We stole mangoes. We stole car radios. We stole kisses behind the outhouse. He promised me New York. He promised me a house with a flush toilet. He promised me forever. And then a bullet from a Don's bodyguard took him. Snap. Gone. No contract. No signature. Just. Stolen. Her grip on June's hand tightened, bones grinding. I swore then, Griselda continued, her voice dropping to a lethal rasp. No one else would steal. Not time. Not distance. Not boredom. Not the law. Not God. If a man belongs to me, he stays. The only way to guarantee a man stays is to bury him. Dead men don't leave. Dead men don't testify. Dead men don't grow old and ugly and look at younger women. Dead men are statues. You build a mausoleum, you put a lock on the door, and you keep the key around your neck. That is love, June. The only love that lasts. June absorbed it. The horror. The logic. The terrifying, crystalline purity of the pathology. She had profiled serial killers, dictators, terrorists. She had looked into the abyss and cataloged the strata. But this was different. This wasn't power for power's sake. This was grief weaponized into a geometry of control. That's a lie, June said softly. You tell yourself that because the truth is worse. Griselda laughed again, a hacking, painful sound. The truth. La Verdad. You think you want the truth, Agent Hawkins. You think the truth sets you free. The truth is a knife in the gut. The truth is, I killed them because I was terrified. Every single night. Terrified that Carlos would wake up and realize he made a monster. Terrified that Alberto would laugh and walk out the door with the money and the next girl. Terrified that Dario, sweet, quiet Dario, would pack a bag for Michael and drive away while I slept. She turned her head back, pinning June with that shark's gaze. I killed them because I couldn't bear the vulnerability of needing them. So I killed the need. I killed the lever they held over my heart. Pop. 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 3 husbands. 3 leverage points removed. I didn't kill them for power, June. I killed them for safety. The silence stretched, filled only by the beep of the heart monitor. Beep. 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 Irregular. Slowing. And Michael, June asked. Your youngest. The one who watched Dario die. Did you kill him too? Griselda's face softened. Just for a second. The monster melted, revealing the ruin underneath. Michael. Michael is the only one I couldn't kill. I tried. God knows I tried. I sent him to the best schools. I bought him the best lawyers. I built walls around him, high enough to keep the devil out. But I couldn't kill the part of him that is me. The part that watches. The part that remembers. She looked at their joined hands. June's warm, living skin. Griselda's cold, dying claws. He is the only witness left, Griselda whispered. The only one who knows the combination to the locks. He carries the keys now. When I am gone, he will open the doors. He will look at the statues. And he will understand. Understand what? June asked. That I didn't want husbands, Griselda said, the words falling like heavy coins into a deep well. I wanted ghosts. And ghosts. Ghosts never leave, the heart monitor stuttered. Beep. Beep. B, a long, flat tone. The machine didn't scream. It simply announced the cessation of the argument. Griselda's hand went limp in June's grasp. The tension vanished, leaving only the dead weight of bone. The yellowed eyes fixed on a corner of the ceiling, unseeing. The mouth fell slightly open. The godmother of cocaine, the Black Widow, the architect of the Miami drug war, the woman who had once made the DEA's most wanted list look like a guest list for a garden party, was gone. June didn't move. She didn't call the nurse. She didn't check for a pulse. She sat in the sudden, roaring silence of the room, holding the hand of a monster, feeling the heat bleed out of it, degree by degree. Outside the window, past the concertina wire and the guard towers, the California sun was setting. It painted the concrete yard in shades of bruised purple and violent orange. A murder of crows lifted from the fence line, wheeling into the darkening sky, black scraps of paper burning in the wind. June Hawkins, retired special agent, CENTAC division, finally let go of the hand. She reached into her leather satchel, pulled out a small, velvet pouch, and poured the contents into her palm. A single gold key. Old-fashioned. Ornate. She placed it on Griselda's cold chest, right over the sternum, where the heart used to beat its terrible rhythm. For the mausoleum, June whispered to the empty shell. You kept the keys, Griselda. But you forgot. Someone has to lock the door behind you. She stood up, her knees popping. She put her glove back on, finger by finger. She zipped the satchel. She straightened her trench coat. At the door, she paused. She looked back once. The plastic roses on the nightstand seemed brighter somehow. The red petals catching the last of the light. June knocked twice. Tap. Tap. The door buzzed open. The Acnescard guard peered in, coffee cup in hand. Ma'am. Everything okay? June looked at the guard, then at the bed, then at the key resting on the white sheet. She's gone, June said. Her voice was flat. Professional. The report written. The case closed. Time of death. 1600 hours. Call the doctor. And take those flowers to the nurse's station. They look like they need the color. She walked out into the corridor, the heavy door sealing the silence behind her. She didn't look back. She never looked back. That was the difference between them. Griselda collected ghosts. June Hawkins buried them. Chapter 8. The hippos of Naples. The heat in Medellin does not break. It simply settles, a heavy, wet blanket thrown over the Ibarra Valley, trapping the exhaust fumes and the scent of frying arepas and the ghost of gunpowder that never truly washes out of the concrete. It is the same heat that baked the slums of La Catalina 60 years ago, the same heat that shimmered off the tin roof of the shack, where a girl named Griselda Restrepo first learned that a rock could settle an argument better than a prayer. Michael Corleone Blanco adjusted the collar of his linen shirt, cream-colored, Italian cut, costing more than the monthly wages of the driver waiting by the rental SUV. He was 43 years old, a man who had built a legitimate empire on the ashes of an illegitimate one, a reality television star, a businessman, a brand. But standing here, at the wrought iron gate of Jardins de Paz, the Gardens of Peace, he was simply the boy in the passenger seat of a white Renault 9, watching his father's brains paint the dashboard. The cemetery sprawled across the hillside, a city of white marble and gray granite, streets laid out in rigid grids that the dead could not disturb. Bougainvillea cascaded over the walls, magenta explosions against the funereal stone. Vendors sold plastic flowers and cold water at the entrance, their voices a low hum beneath the cicadas' scream. Michael walked the path he knew by heart. He didn't need a map. The geography of his grief was etched into his soles. First, the mausoleum of Carlos Trujillo. It was the oldest, the stone yellowed by decades of acid rain. Simple, austere, a businessman's tomb. No angels weeping, no virgins with upturned eyes. Just the name, Carlos Trujillo. Padre, ESPUSO, 1940, 1983. Michael ran his fingertips over the cold lettering. He remembered almost nothing of the man, only a smell. Expensive tobacco, mentholated rub, and the metallic tang of blood. He remembered a heavy hand on his shoulder, not affectionate, positioning him. Stand straight, Mijo. You are a Trujillo. Carlos had built the foundation. He had taught Griselda the grammar of the trade, the ledgers, the roots, the corruption of officials. And she had repaid the lesson by removing the teacher. The first contract signed in blood. Michael moved on, his loafers silent on the paved avenue. Alberto Bravo rested 20 meters away, but he might as well have been on another continent. This mausoleum was gaudy. Black marble shot through with gold veins. A life-size statue of a lion, wings outstretched, guarded the door. Alato winged because Alberto always thought he could fly. The inscription was longer, poetic, written in Griselda's hand. Alberto Bravo. M-I-R-E-Y. M-I-E-S-B-J-O. 1940, 1975. Volamos juntos, quemos solos. We flew together. We fell alone. Michael felt the old, familiar twitch in his jaw. Alberto. The ghost of Queens. The man who taught Griselda how to wear power like a mink coat. Michael had seen the photos. His mother in halter tops and hot pants, snorting lines off mirrored tables at Studio 54, Alberto beside her in silk shirts unbuttoned to the navel, both of them holding Mac 10s like champagne flutes. They were beautiful monsters. They were the 70s. Alberto had tried to steal the product. He had tried to steal the woman. Griselda had settled the dispute in a Bogotá nightclub called El Circulo, turning a business meeting into the OK Corral. Michael had heard the audio recordings the DEA played at the trial, the pop-pop-pop of the mini Uzis, the screaming, and then, above it all, his mother's voice, calm as a surgeon, S. You were mine, Alberto. You were always mine. He didn't leave flowers for Alberto. He never did. He just touched the cold nose of the golden lion and whispered, You crazy son of a bitch. The third mausoleum was smaller. Whiter. Cleaner. As if time had not yet dared to stain it. Dario Sepulveda. Dario Sepulveda. Padre. Amado. 1952, 1983. Amado. Beloved. The only one who got the word Amado. Michael stopped. His breath hitched, a physical catch in his throat. This was the one. The axis upon which the world tilted. He pressed his palm flat against the cool stone. He could feel the vibration of the city beneath it, the metro rattling deep underground, the endless river of motorcycles on the avenues above. Dario. The quiet one. The watcher. The only man who ever held Griselda's hair back while she retched from the chemo, or the pregnancy, or the paranoia. The only one who read El Principito to a 5-year-old boy in a hammock at Hacienda Naples, doing voices for the fox and the snake, making Michael laugh until his ribs hurt. Michael remembered the smell of Dario, gun oil, leather, and agua de colonia, cheap cologne, the kind taxi drivers wore. He remembered the weight of Dario's hand on his head, heavy and warm. Protector. And he remembered the sound. The wet, tearing crack of the motorcycle assassins, bullets, her invention, her signature shattering the Renault's window. The spray of red heat across his face, his Spider-Man t-shirt. The way his father's head had lolled, the neck broken, the eyes open, staring at nothing. Michael had not cried then. He had not cried at the funeral. He had not cried when they lowered this box into the ground. He had stared at his mother, standing in black Chanel behind a veil, dry-eyed, imperial, the only dry thing in a weeping world. She had looked at him, her youngest, her Michael Corleone, and he had seen the truth in her gaze. I did this for you. I made him eternal. He will never leave us now. Mikey, the voice was gravel in a blender. Rough. American accented Spanish. Michael didn't turn. He knew that gait. The slight drag of the left leg. The smell of Marlboro Reds and expensive rum. June, he said. His voice was smooth, the voice of the CEO, the TV personality. You came. Agent June Hawkins, retired Special Agent June Hawkins, now stepped up beside him. She was 70-something now, her hair a crown of sharp white curls, her face a topographical map of deep lines and sun damage. She wore a beige linen suit that looked like armor, sensible flats, and sunglasses that hid eyes that had seen the devil and taken notes. I said I would, she said. Her voice was softer than the legend. Thought I'd see the end of the file. She stood shoulder to shoulder with him, looking at Dario's name. She didn't cross herself. She didn't pray. She lit a cigarette, cupping the flame against the wind, the flare illuminating the hollows of her cheeks. He was a good man, June said, smoke curling from her nostrils. The only one who had a chance. You know that, Michael nodded, his throat tight. He wanted to take me to a farm. Cows. Chickens. No guns. Yeah. I read the wiretaps. He called a lawyer in Bogota. I have to get my son out. Those were the words. She glanced sideways at Michael, her gaze sharp behind the dark lenses. She heard stealing. She heard betrayal. She never heard saving. She didn't know the word, Michael said, the bitterness rising, hot and old. The only language she spoke fluently was possession. June exhaled, a long stream of gray. We talked about it. In Dublin. In Tallahassee. Hours of tape. She told me once, June, a living man is a question mark. A dead man is a period. I prefer punctuation. Michael let out a harsh, barking laugh. She always did love her grammar. She loved control, June corrected gently. And she knew, in the end, that the only thing she could truly control was the exit. They stood in silence for a long time. The cicadas rose and fell. A vendor's cry drifted up the hill. Mangoes. Mangoes dulces. She's not here, you know, June said suddenly. Michael frowned, glancing at the fourth plot. The empty space beside Dario. The plot is bought. The stone is cut. GRSLDA, Bilancio Ariastiri PO. 1943-2012. He gestured to the polished slab leaning against the rear wall, waiting. She died in Medellin. They buried her here. 2 years ago. Her body is here, June agreed. But she's not. She's down in the river. Michael looked at her, confused. The Magdalena. She hated the coast. Too hot. Too many mosquitoes, not the coast. The river. Upstream. Near Puerto Triunfo, June flicked ash onto the marble path. The Hacienda Naples. The zoo, Michael stiffened. The zoo is gone. The government seized it. It's a theme park now. Park Tematico Hacienda Naples. Families go there. Kids ride the little train. They take selfies with the concrete dinosaurs. The dinosaurs are concrete, June said, tapping her cigarette. The hippos are not, Michael frowned. The hippos. The cocaine hippos, 4 of them. She smuggled them in the 80s. 3 females, 1 male. Pablo, June repeated. She named the bull after Pablo Escobar. Or maybe after Papo. She never said. But she loved that bull. Said he was the only male who understood territory. They sterilized the females, Michael said, reciting the news reports. The government. Environmental hazard. Invasive species. They destroy the riverbanks, eat the crops, attack fishermen. They're a plague she left behind, June said. She knew. When they deported her in 04, when she went to that little apartment in Medellin, she didn't hide. She didn't run. She sat on her balcony with her binoculars, not watching the street for hitmen, watching the sky, waiting for the news. News of what? Of the hippos spreading, moving down the Magdalena, claiming new territory. She read the ecological reports like they were stock tickers. They are mine, she told me on the phone 3 months before she died. They eat. They fuck. They kill anything in their water. And they never, ever leave. They are the only boys I raised right. A chill went through Michael, unrelated to the heat. He looked at the 3 mausoleums. Carlos. Alberto. Dario. 3 men buried in stone. And the 4th stone, waiting. She didn't want a husband, Michael whispered, the realization settling in his bones like lead. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a monument that breathed. She wanted something that couldn't sign divorce papers, June said. Something that couldn't testify. Something that couldn't grow up and hate her. She turned, fixing him with that piercing, compassionate gaze. She got her wish, Mikey. 4 times over. But the hippos are the only ones winning. Michael looked back at the empty plot. The waiting stone. Griselda Blanco Ariasteripio. She was shot, he said, the facts clinical. Drive-by. Motorcycle. 2 men. 1 shot to the head. Outside a butcher shop in Medellin. Buying meat for the dogs. Irony. The Black Widow, killed by her own invention. Poetic justice, June murmured. Or just the bill coming due. She died instantly, Michael continued. They said she didn't suffer. I hope that's a lie. I hope she saw the muzzle flash. I hope she knew, for 1 second, what it felt like to be Dario. To be Alberto. To be Carlos. To be the one who stays. June reached out, her hand finding his wrist, her fingers papery but strong. The first touch of tenderness he had accepted in years. She knew, June said quietly. In that room at the end. She knew. She looked at me and said, I buried them all. Papo in the dirt. Carlos in the past. Alberto in blood. Dario in front of the boy. I built a cemetery and called it a family. She wasn't bragging, Mikey. She was confessing. Michael turned to her, his mask slipping, the CEO vanishing, the boy in the blood-spattered Spider-Man shirt surfacing. Did she love them? June didn't hesitate. She loved them the way a hurricane loves the ocean. She needed them to exist. And when they threatened to exist without her, she erased them. And me, Michael asked, his voice cracking. Am I erased? Or am I the one who got away? June took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were pale blue, faded as old denim but infinitely deep. She had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had given her a pension. You're the witness, Michael. You're the one who stands at the gate and reads the names. You're the one who decides what the story means. She couldn't control that. She tried, God, how she tried with those letters from prison. Don't trust men. Don't trust women. Trust only the product. But you built something else. You built a life. A legal life. A son of your own. Michael thought of his own son, 18 now, studying business in Miami, wearing polo shirts, smelling of cologne and laundry detergent. No gun oil. No blood. I named him Michael, Michael said. Not Corleone. Just Michael. June smiled, a rare, fragile thing. There you go. You broke the cycle. You made the ghost stay in the ground. Michael looked back at the 4 plots. 3 occupied. 1 waiting. The bougainvillea bloomed violently red over the walls. The heat pressed down. She's not in the ground, June, Michael said, the words tasting like copper. She's in the river. She's a 2-ton beast with thick skin and no natural predators. She's eating the ecosystem alive. She's forever. June put her sunglasses back on. She crushed the cigarette beneath her sensible flat. Then I guess the job isn't finished. We just have to make sure the fences hold. She turned to leave, her stride steady, the drag in her leg almost invisible. Goodbye, Michael. Take care of yourself. Goodbye, June, he whispered. He watched her walk down the avenue of the dead, a solitary figure in beige, moving toward the gate where the world was loud and bright and alive. Michael turned back to the stone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single item. Not flowers. Not a candle. A brass key. Old, tarnished. The key to the front door of the apartment in La Catalina, where it all began. The one Griselda had pressed into his hand on her deathbed, her fingers skeletal, her breath rattling. For the hippos, Mijo. So they can come home. He didn't put it on the stone. He didn't leave it. He slipped it into his own pocket, next to his phone, his wallet, the keys to the SUV. He looked up at the sky. High above, a vulture circled on a thermal, motionless, patient. 4 husbands, he said to the stone, to the heat, to the cicadas. 4 ghosts. And a herd of hippos expanding into the Magdalena. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the smell of marble, smoke, and frying plantains. They asked why she murdered every man she loved, he murmured, his voice carrying on the heavy air. They thought it was hate. They thought it was power. They thought it was madness. He placed his hand on the cold marble of Dario's marker, then Carlos's, then Alberto's. He paused at the blank 4th slab. Standing here, he said, the words forming the shape of a final period, I know the truth. It wasn't hate. He turned, walking back down the path toward the gate, toward the driver, toward the SUV, toward the life he had built with his own hands, a life that smelled of laundry detergent and possibility. It wasn't hate, he said, to the valley, to the river, to the invisible beasts roaming the waterways far below. It was the only way she knew to keep them. He didn't look back. She didn't want husbands, the voiceover carried, disembodied, echoing over the white stones. She wanted ghosts. And ghosts never leave. The gate swung shut behind him with a heavy, metallic clang. Somewhere, far down the mountain, in the brown, slow current of the Magdalena River, a massive gray shape broke the surface. It blew a great, wet gust of air, a sound like a bellows, ancient and indifferent. It submerged again, disappearing into the opaque water, claiming the channel, expanding the territory, permanent as stone, hungry as time.